We're calling board member Lizette Cortez.
Hi, Lizette. I'm hearing my own voice, but not hers.
Thank you for being here. Did most of those folks get you the information about?
Yeah, we have a lot to report out here.
Thank you
A
so
lot of
much.
exciting things happening.
Thank you.
Hey, Lizette, Sophia. Yeah, no, I can. Sorry, I was in behind myself. But we're starting the open session. So I'm here in the room in front of everyone. Oddly, on a power outage day, all this technology going on. Welcome everybody to the Cabrillo Unified School District Governing Board meeting. Today is Thursday, October 10th, 2019. Thank you for being here. It's been quite a week. I'm glad to have the power back on. We'll just start with that. Let's start with our agenda. We will start with the pledge. There is no action to report from closed session, so we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, item number 6. So, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Item number 7, adoption of agenda as presented or amended. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 5 plus 1 to 0. 5 plus 1, oh, yeah. So I'm going to expect her to vote, so. Yeah, I heard you, sorry, Lizette, I was clarifying for the group. Okay, item number 8, student, staff, community recognition. Seeing as there is none, we'll move to item 9. Comments from the public related to items not on this agenda. I have one item here from Rachel Sage. Oh, there you are. Come on up, please. And I think everyone is familiar with the process here for public comments and items not related to the agenda, which is we invite folks in the public to come here and speak with us. Typically, we're ready for about 3 minutes. It can be on whatever topic they choose. And due to Brown Act, we're not allowed to respond, but we welcome the comments and we'll incorporate them. And typically, if there is a follow-up necessary, then Dr. McFetridge or his staff will follow up. So, welcome. Hi.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Rachel Sage. I'm a reading teacher at Fairlawn View. Push the phone to be louder. I've never been told to be louder before.
Awesome. Thanks. Oh, it's for TV. Great.
It was 2 weeks ago, 2 very long weeks ago, when we had a lockdown at Fairlawn View. I could speak for a long time about how difficult it is that this is the reality in our current society, but what I really want to do is express my gratitude for the way our community stepped up. When we heard the clear but strained voice of our office manager say, "This is not a drill," followed by the wailing of sirens, we all knew what to do. Those of us in classrooms didn't know that the police had taken control of the situation, that they were making all the decisions, but it was clear that they were on the way. I sent an email to my husband that I never thought I would send. We're on lockdown. There are sirens. I love you. When I was finally able to go to the office, I saw the strained faces of our classified office staff, who were expertly working with the sheriff to organize parent reunification. It was by no means perfect, but in about 90 minutes, all parents were reunited with their children, one by one. This must have felt like an eternity for parents who just wanted to see and hold their children. I know it was a relief for me when the officers appeared with each child and the child was skipping, smiling, and giggling as most were. This was an expression of the care and comfort the teachers provided and the warmth the officers showed. I know there were and will be residual anxieties, but I also know the kids were safe and I think they felt safe. I have many people to thank for that. Our district administration really stepped up the day of that event, and everyone showed up that day and the next day on site. Our new principal, Ms. Childer, barely got through a month of school before this event, and she handled it so well. Our students, I'm so thankful for them. They were so flexible and so resilient. Our parents were so caring and understanding and are using this as a productive time to suggest changes. Our teachers were remarkable in keeping every student calm, comfortable, fed, and safe. And most of all, our office staff. They dealt with a stressful situation that was so scary, and they acted like the professionals that they are. They responded appropriately to direction from police and were on the front lines when they heard of a threat to everyone's safety. I hope, pray, and beg that we never have to go through this again, but if we do, I know our precious kids are in really good hands. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Okay, seeing there's no further comments from the public related to items not in this agenda, we will proceed to item 10, representative reports, starting with CUTA.
Good evening. I see how can I follow that. Good evening, board members, President Sophia Lane, and Brenda, one of my students, and Dr. Mefetrich, of course. So I don't have much to say tonight. I just want to say that I'm very excited about upcoming dates for negotiations, and we recently received some possible dates. So hopefully we can come to an agreement and then start meeting and continue with negotiations. Why am I so excited? I was just going over different the districts in San Mateo County, and I was looking at the numbers, and out of like 28 districts, we ranked number 25. So it's kind of disappointing, right? We are below the average salary compared to most of the other districts, which is kind of sad. But I'm excited. I'm sure we are going to come to an agreement soon, and we'll see what happens. Thank you so much.
And I'm going to be super short and super sweet. We are day 39 that we just finished in the dark, and we are day 102 without a contract. Let's resolve this. Thanks.
Thank you, CUTA. Do we have a representative from CSEA here today? Okay, going once, going twice. All right, we will move on. Item 11, reports, information, and presentations. 11A, receive Cabrillo Unified School District's Curriculum, Instruction, and Categorical Department and LCAP Local Performance Indicators Report. Dr. Batia.
It's on, right? Okay. Good evening, President Lane, trustees, cabinet, community members. I'm here today to present an informational presentation on two items. The first, an overview and an update on curriculum, instruction, and categorical goals and data, as well as a presentation on the LCAP local indicators. For the first part of the presentation, I want to share with you our curriculum and instruction categorical goals for the next 3 years, an overview of our current CASP data that was recently just released, and also an MTSS update, which has been the focus of our professional development for this academic year. In regards to the local indicator review, we'll go ahead and review local indicators, data and the data collection process, as well as ask for approval for the local indicators to submission to the state by November 1st. I am new here, about 3.5 months, and as I began to discover many things under the Curriculum Instruction Department, I always go back to what Marzano defines as a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Now, about guaranteed, it means committing to each student having access to effective teachers and access to the same content, knowledge, and skills to have the opportunity of success in school. And by content, we mean standards, defined standards that are systematic and equal across all grade levels. Viable means to ensure that students have been slotted enough time to learn the guaranteed curriculum. By this, I see it as instructional minutes and a set, making sure that there's a viable access to a recommendation of instructional minutes across. So for instance, a kindergarten student at Hatch will receive the same amount of English, math, science, social studies, PE as a child that is at Farallon View. And I share this definition because this is directly linked to our goals. As you can see, for this academic year, and thanks to my predecessor, Joy Dardanelle and Dr. Wade, they have been very forward-thinking in ensuring that we engage in our multi-tiered system of support. And that has been our anchor and will be our anchor for the next 3 years. And something that I just actually learned from the San Mateo County Office of Education is that this year we are engaging in a new local control accountability plan template, and it is completely embedded around MTSS. So we are ahead of the game with making sure that MTSS is the anchor that we are following and engaging in our professional development. Now, another area that I have discovered is the need to create and adopt a language master plan. The state of California requires all districts to engage our District English Language Acquisition Committee and our community to adopt a language master plan to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our English learner students. And so this year, we will engage with a committee. We're creating a committee of English Learner Council made up of classified, certificated, and community members in order to help create this language master plan. And of course, LCAP will always be a main focus in the curriculum and instruction side, and ensuring that our local control accountability plan has goals that are connected to MTSS, that are connected to board goals, state standards, and that our funding is directly aligned to those goals. Now, one question that I put in here is using professional learning communities, that stands for PLC. There are 4 questions that really help any educational organization in engaging in the process of defining a systematic and defining a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Now, the first question that I will support our superintendent in our community is what is it that we want students to learn? And later on, I'll talk to you about our curriculum advisory committee, but as a team, we will support in defining this and defining what are the approved curricula and supplemental materials, what are the core and supplemental materials that we are using in the classroom. And second, as I had mentioned earlier, is defining and recommending a core instructional minutes across pre-K through 12th grade. For the upcoming year, 2021, we will continue with MTSS. We will now continue to implement the language master plan. And LCAP, as you can see, all of these 3 goals are consistent across the next 3 school years. However, in the PLC question number 2, in the 2020-21 school year, again, with a team, a committee, we hope to define how will we know if each student learned it? And by this, we mean defining priority standards. We have adopted the state Common Core state standards, but even there are lots of standards. It is important for any district to define our priority or key standards and also determine formative and summative assessments that will ensure that we know if students are meeting standard or if students need some sort of intervention to get to standard. And the last year, of course, is further defining interventions as well as enrichment in addressing PLC questions 3 and 4. How will we respond if students did not learn, and how will we respond if students have learned, in defining enrichment programs. So specifically, the how our department will do this is developing a curriculum advisory committee, and the purpose of the CAC would be to review current curriculum adoptions. The state, California Department of Ed enters into 8-year cycles of adoptions, is to also take a look at core curriculum purchases, supplemental purchases, as well as instructional minutes. This is a recommendation of the members, 1 teacher per site, 2 principals, 1 from elementary, 1 from secondary, 1 assistant superintendent, and 1 classified member. Meetings are being planned right now to be held 3:30 to 5. Of course, our classified and certificated teachers will be paid hourly for this. And on the right, you're going to see a visual where we can get recommendations for any type of curriculum. The state from the top contacts and directs districts to ensure that we are at level with any curriculum adoption process in the core contents. But also, if you look at the bottom of the visual, parents and as well as staff can also bring recommendations to their school site council, which then will come to curriculum advisory committee to vet and ensure that the curriculum is approved, is aligned to Common Core, and that the funding is there to ensure that we can purchase funding and sustain the curriculum. After approval of curriculum at the CAC meeting, then we would come bring a recommendation to the board so that the board can ultimately give your stamp of approval and be informed as to which curriculum we're adopting at the school sites. Another committee that we will engage in this year is an English Learner Council. Now, the purpose of the English Learner Council will be to define the master plan, mission, and vision. It would serve as an advisory board to our department. It would advise and support in all the different areas an English Learner Master Plan should have: EL identification, assessment, and placement, instructional programs, English Learner student monitoring and reclassification, parent and community involvement, evaluation and accountability, as well as look at funding and resources. And as I mentioned, we want to define our English Learner Master Plan. We want to call it a language master plan because we have a bilingual program in our district. By calling it a language master plan, we can define not only our goal in ensuring we meet our English learner needs, but also the needs of our language learners, which can be English-only students learning a second language. Here's yet another just view of what the members would look like, as well as the English Learner Council meetings. We are setting aside 4 to 5 meetings, again, 3:30 to 5, and we call these EL-a-thons because we do not have an English Learner Master Plan. It takes 8-hour days with a team of people in making sure that we defined the plan to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our English learner students. And so the goal is to bring to you a recommendation for approval for an English Learner Master Plan sometime in summer 2020, June, July. Thank you. And this is a quick CASP overview. We submitted this rough data analysis using just the raw scores that we received from CASP to the board. 2 days ago, the California Department of Ed published the California dashboard. So there may be a tweak in some of the numbers, not large, but the numbers may be slightly different than what we see on the California school dashboard. As you can see, and I did want to mention that this is only one view of data on how our students are performing here at Cabrillo Unified. As you know, we also have local assessments, and so we don't want to become too surprised if we see a variance in the data because we have we also have social emotional data, we have various points of assessments that we also use in ensuring that we are monitoring the progress of our students. And as you can see, we definitely had an increase in our 3rd and 5th grade students, and we definitely have some opportunities of growth in other grades. But again, with the Curriculum Advisory Council, we hope to define a data monitoring system, data analysis with professional learning communities and cycle of inquiry to really use data as the anchor to ensure where we can focus interventions in the classroom. In mathematics, we see a strong growth in 4th and 5th grade and also other opportunities of growth. There seems to have been a peak in 7th, 8th, and 11th during the 2018 school year. But if you compare 2017 to 2019, we see 8th and 11th that actually did have a growth or steady increase.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I'm reading this correctly, I have to decode a different color to watch one group of kids go through from 3rd to 4th to 5th. Because, so when you're saying
These are the same.
it's a different group of kids. So if you're saying you did better in 18 than 17 in, like, from one grade to the next, that's a whole different group of kids. And so you have to look at it from, like, 2017 is the blue column in 3rd grade, and then it's the brown column in 4th grade, and it's the gray column in 5th grade. So it's a little bit harder. To be able to understand it would be, I would color code one group of kids to show the progress.
Correct. And like I said, the California School Dashboard just came up with the data, so we were working with an Excel file. So we had to convert a CSV file to Excel. And so this is just a very short overview of the assessments, but definitely we can dig deeper as to cohort-wise to take a look.
Just to explain, I mean, this is not cohort data, this is just year-by-year data, and what you will see, and it was just released, I think, today, the CASP dashboard, those test results, those will take in cohort data to show your dashboard indicators, and that will come at a future meeting.
Yes.
But I'm correct in the way I'm
You are.
interpreting.
Yes,
Yes,
the
you
way
are.
you are interpreting is correct.
Okay.
It's not cohort data, it's grade. Yes. Now, for the English language proficiency assessment for California, we actually, with the rough data analysis, because again, the California School Dashboard just became public today, yesterday, today. And if you can see, our English learners are performing very well. They are performing at most grades are performing around mid-moderately developed to mid-moderately developed. And so our reclassification criteria is any student performing mid-range moderately developed and above. And so we have a celebration here because the interventions and the hard work that our classroom teachers and classroom aides in the classroom are working on, there is progress, especially with a significant subgroup. So this is definitely a celebration for LPAC. Now, how will CIC begin to implement our goals? And as I mentioned earlier, with a multi-tiered system of support, we have anchored our professional development on our MTSS framework. Next week, we will be hosting our first elementary MTSS district-wide training. We are partnering with San Mateo County Office of Ed and the Circle Up organization with a focus on equity and how to ensure we lead with an equity focus in the classroom. And I also wanted to just share and review this professional development plan was presented to the board in June. And as you can see, we have some elementary sites who are focusing on dyslexia, on primary phonics instruction and upper grammar conventions, lessons intervention at El Grano, for example. And This is something that I firmly believe in, that literacy means equity. And so that's why that's important for us to ensure that our students have a strong foundation in structured literacy. And if you take a look at the next slide, we have also amazing things happening at our secondary level. We have Half Moon Bay High School covering drug education and state and behavioral data review. We have work around restorative practice at Pilarcitos High School as well as Cunha Elementary School. And we really hope to make sure that we support the whole child in ensuring that we're supporting not only their academic needs, but also their social and emotional needs. We believe in ensuring that we engage in a cycle of continuous improvement. And the way to do this is we need to ask when we deliver professional development is, how is this working? Is this working well? Are you learning? Are you learning something that you can easily implement in the classroom? And do we have areas of growth? Because we all believe in the concept of growth mindset, and even ourselves as leaders, as educators, we all have room for growth. And so we did survey our secondary district-wide professional development. And here are some of the results. As you can see, 17 of 33 responses scored 3 to 5 in making sure that they communicated if our professional development was effective. And another question we asked is, did you learn a new leadership and or instructional strategy? We had 75% of our secondary staff who did say they learned an instructional strategy. Now, I didn't share this with you, but we also had an open-ended questions where staff were able to share with us why they felt the professional development was effective and why they didn't feel it was effective. And so our team is definitely getting together to analyze and just grow and provide our educators with effective professional development as we continue this school year.
Just real quick, what is the percentage of responses?
We had about 80.
Okay.
80. And from what I read on surveys.
Room for improvement too.
Definitely. What I read on surveys, that typically you will get about 15% response rate on surveys. And so we might want to look at some incentives, or maybe using some staff meeting time to ask our staff, or maybe hold at that actual training. That's what we're learning, that's where we're learning. Maybe at our next Super Tuesday training, we can save about 5 minutes to have our staff complete the survey and improve our response rate. Yes. Any questions on curriculum instruction categorical update?
I'm going to ask Lizette on the phone if hopefully you were able to hear the presentation, Lizette, from Leticia. And then we'll just make sure we check in with you, because I know sometimes when you're on the phone, it's a little hard. Do you have any questions or comments for Leticia? Okay, so no, thank you. Okay, great. I want to just make a comment relating to Kim's question. I'm a little bit of a data junkie too, and I appreciate that you gave us kind of the snapshot, the fresh hot off the presses, and I'm also really excited to hear that you'll be working with the curriculum, the the Curriculum Advisory Committee, CAC, to do some more data mining analysis, to look at different views of that data, like by cohort or whatever, to see. So I think that's always the key thing. It's like just looking at data in different ways to see what the story is there. So I appreciate that you spoke to that point too. And I appreciate especially that the strategy, everything that you presented today, but especially the strategy that you outlined in the earlier pages, the three, like the year over year, what you're doing with the key major pieces and how those relate to one another and how those will evolve and build on each other year to year. I think, and we've seen similar things from Holly in the past too, with regards to special education, just seeing that you're having that long-term focus, but breaking into chunks and how you're going to work together with people to get there, I think is a really effective way to tackle some really challenging things that you're trying to do. So I just want to express appreciation for that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
It's real quick. Yeah, thank you, Leticia. It's wonderful. to get this snapshot, and I agree it'd be great to get the cohort data at some point. And also, I want to add on to that the local data that is helpful in terms of actual from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, in terms of how individual students are improving in their reading and other things. And I think that we have our local assessments. I don't know if you're going to be looking at what we do in local assessments and reassessing that. I just find sometimes those can be more helpful than the standardized testing at the end of the year for determining. So just something to consider for future.
Yes, definitely, we'll be looking at that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, we'll, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Dr. Apatia and her team and all the teachers in the district for making sure we have this focus going forward and working in this professional development so we're all learning together.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so we'll move on to item 11B, receive the enrollment
Oh,
report.
I have one.
Oh, you do have one more. Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. That's right, the.
Yes. I'll try to be quick on this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to get out of here.
No.
So
I
we have
forgot.
local indicator measurements.
Yeah, okay.
And so just a quick overview, we have two buckets of performance indicators in the local control accountability plan. We have state performance indicators, and we also have local performance indicators, and they're each quantified differently. For the performance indicators of the state, you now will see the little colorful gauge, where red is the lowest performing, blue is the highest performing. For the local performance indicators, it is a self-rating submission to the California Department of Education, where we rate ourselves whether we've met objectives, not met objectives, or have not met objectives for 2 or more years. And here is an overview of the indicators. For the state indicators, of course, we look at academics. This basically are our SBAC scores in ELA and math. English Learner Progress, which is the data from the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California, chronic absenteeism, graduation rate, suspension rate, and career in college. For our local indicators, which is the purpose of this presentation, I will be sharing with you the rating that we used for defining how we met basic conditions, parent engagement, implementation on academic standards, school climate, and access to a broad course of study. And so for the basic conditions, we met this objective. In our pupil personnel department, we use EPIC as well as our own Excel spreadsheet in ensuring that we are looking at our human resource data and ensuring that we sustain our objective was to sustain a less than 5% misalignment of teacher vacancies, incorrect, no credentials, non-highly qualified. And as you can see on our analysis, 100% of our teachers have a credential, 0.006% of misalignments in vacant teacher positions, and 100% of teachers are considered highly qualified. For priority 2, the tool used was, as I described earlier, our multi-tiered system of support framework implementation. And our objective was to identify, monitor, and assess the levels of implementation of MTSS throughout the district in order to promote and improve proficiency level of all students. This would be done not only here at the district level when we have our principal leadership team meetings. We work with our principals to share best practices on site-based MTSS implementation. The analysis was here is making sure that we're moving towards a target of professional development, is again the development of the CAC, the Curriculum Advisory Committee, that can support us in quantifying this. Also defining an RTI 2, which is response to intervention and instruction, in particular the Tier 1 instruction. How can we look at instruction, that Tier 1, before we recommend students for interventions? And lastly, curriculum design to support differentiated instruction. Now, we definitely have still progress to go in this area. We have a need to assess and define the exact supplemental and core materials that we're using. We have a need we know that core instruction is being taught in every single classroom, but we need to make sure that we define a district-wide recommendation of instructional minutes. And also, as I had shown you in year 3 of our curriculum instruction and categorical plan is to define the common formative assessments. Doesn't mean that we're not using them, but to really focus that third year on this definition. And we definitely have met our objective. In regards to parent engagement, we provide surveys to different stakeholders such as parents, staff, students. This is not limited to Panorama Survey or LCAP Survey, California Healthy Kids Survey. We had, in family engagement based on the Panorama Survey, 712 respondents, which is pretty amazing for a small community. I was very impressed with that number. And out of these responses, there were, I would probably have to say, over 60 questions that we asked our different stakeholders. So I just gave you a sampling of the questions. And so for instance, one question was, how involved have you been with a parent group at your child's school, where 22% responded favorably? Now, again, we believe in continuous improvement, and so data is important for us, even though it might not be where we would like it to be, but it gives us an opportunity for us to grow and take a look at resources and staff and ensuring that we can improve our efforts in parent engagement. The LCAP survey, here are a couple of other questions. How could we better partner with families? Because again, we saw this low response in the LCAP survey. My predecessor, Joy Dardanelle, asked the question, how could we better partner with families in supporting our students? Is one, making sure that we inform parents when our students are falling behind. And another suggestion could be to improve communication between teachers, counselors, parents, when they can or can't come to meetings. Another question, is there something that we should be doing that we aren't doing yet to help struggling students? Some couple of suggestions were after-school enrichment intervention program, as well as social emotional learning program, which with the help of Dr. Wade, we are definitely working and implementing a systematic social emotional program here at Cabrillo. The self-assessment tool, here are just some bullet points. Self-assessment tool. This is the first year that the California Department of Ed is asking us to rate ourselves in these three areas: building relationships between school staff and families. The second, building partnerships for student outcomes. And lastly, seeking input for decision making. We are not alone in this. This is something that the state of California has noticed, that districts and with the MTSS structure, we need to involve and partner with our families. And so we are asking our leadership and community liaisons and selected staff at our school sites to engage in this tool and self-assess. Now, please note that doesn't matter how the responses are, whether they're low or high, as long as we give the tool, we meet the objective. And so this is due November 1st, and once you approve this, and we can carry on and submit this to the California Department of Education. School climate, again, using Panorama and Healthy Kids Survey. The objective was to identify, monitor, and assess the level of implementation of, I'm sorry, that's not it. The objective was 59% of students to feel they belong to the school. And here were some of the sample responses of our students. 48% of students were excited about their classes. 70% of students feel the energy at their school is positive. 86% of students think school will be useful in the future. 90% of students thought school will be useful in the future. Sorry about that. Okay, actions. Some of this, think it thought, yes. So some of the actions that meet the school climate, again, MTSS training. We have engaged in a positive behavior training across the district. And also, if you take a look at our LCAP Goal 1, it states to create a positive school climate where students feel safe and supported. And access to a broad course of study. How do we measure? This is basically revolves around career technical education and making sure that we give different opportunities for our students to access a broad course of study. And as you can see, we have 52.5% of our students who graduation, our graduation requirements are aligned through A through G. Coursework also includes CTE pathways at our high school, such as agriculture, building trades and construction, as well as UC, CSU entrance requirements. And as I mentioned earlier, our next steps by November 1st is to submit this information to the California School Dashboard, is to prioritize gap areas and focus objectives on growth in the subsequent years. And that is the end.
And again, Dr. Patia presents this for you for your approval because we are mandated to do this by November 1st. Many districts are scrambling to do this. I appreciate you knowing to do this. I know other superintendents have told me, oh my gosh, this is coming up. So we need the board to approve this for us to move on.
Just a point of clarification, it's not in the action items, it's in discussion, so how does the approval form? Do we need to amend our?
I'm sorry, let me clarify. It is just a presentation. As long as we present at a board meeting, it is approvable. Yes.
My apologies, I
apologize.
misspoke.
I apologize. There is no vote.
Are there any questions and comments? First of all, thank you. Any questions or comments for this piece of the conference?
Yes, in the,
I have one, just like, let's just, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate that assimilation of all the information and going through. It does help tell the story.
thank you.
Gives you the benchmark on what to look for in the future. So I think that's a good self-check for all of us.
Thank you. Let me do a quick check. Lizette, are you there? Lizette? I'll hear myself, but not her, so I'm gonna try one more time. Just for the technical bench. Hi, Lizette. Trouble, let's see if I can get off speaker. Lizette? I'm gonna try in a couple minutes again. I was having trouble earlier. So we'll see. Okay. I'm gonna try her again in a couple minutes, so we'll try until then. Maybe it'll resolve whatever's happening with the phones. I did have one question, just to make sure I understand. So that first list that you sent us was the, or that you showed us what is already online and is already live. That was a thing that you said was on today or yesterday.
The California School Dashboard,
Okay,
that is live
That is
for
live.
public access.
okay. And this part is what you need to submit by November 1st, and then it'll be live on the dashboard also?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm not quite sure
Excellent.
when because of
Okay, sometime
timeline,
after
but
the
at some
first,
point
okay.
after it follows.
That makes
Yes.
sense. I just want to make sure I got that straight. Good. Other than that, I didn't have any questions on the content. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now that you're completely done, we'll go to the next item, Holly. Item number 11B, receive the enrollment report for 2019. And while Holly is coming up to the podium and turning on the mic, I'm going to try Lizette one more time. Considering we get modern technology to work better than our power grid has in the last day and a half.
We do have a forum, but.
Voicemail, yeah, okay. Well, I'm gonna let it go because it's going straight to voicemail, and, go ahead. Thank you, Holly.
Good evening, board members. I'm here to bring you a brief update on our enrollment in Cabrillo Unified. So I'm just going to briefly go over enrollment trends, compare enrollment history by site, review enrollment boundaries, and while I was sitting over there for the first time, I reviewed my slides. Apparently, the power outage has corrupted my data on one of my slides because the numbers just don't add up. So I'm just going to skip that slide.
Nice
and
try.
They just don't add up. So I'm really not a numbers person, Jim. So I offer you here a 9-year, 2020 2010 to 2020 enrollment trends, and this is our unified school district enrollment trends. You see each school is represented by one of the bars here, so our little tiny bars generally are Kings Mountain and Pilarcitos, our alternative education program. Our highest enrolled school obviously is Half Moon Bay High School, and you can see that that school has grown in general this year. And then we have our elementary schools, Farallon, El Granada, and Hatch represented. So overall, our enrollment trend from 2010 to 2019, you see declining enrollment, and I thank President Lane for the question. I was able to do a little bit of research, and yes, this is consistent, this trend with California, and also with San Mateo County. So we are seeing an enrollment trend here that is declining overall.
Correct, it's not quite as steep as the last couple of years?
Correct. And this is where the
And
problems...
just to clarify, we can see each year here, right? So it's, since 2014-15, it's pretty straight. Okay. So pretty even from year to year from the previous 5 years, 4 years.
Yes.
I'll just chime in here. In weeks ahead, hopefully, or in the next month or so, you will have a demographer's report, and you will see, because I've seen preliminary numbers on this, that it is projected that these numbers continue to decline. This is a statewide trend. This is a
Same rate?
yes, you're going to see a drop of, 30, 50, 80 students a year. And we have been seeing that over time. You can see that now. That is part of the reason why we're in the budget crisis we're in. That's part of the reason why many districts are in the budget crises that they're in. This is a countywide trend. This is a statewide trend.
Thank you, Dr. McFetrich. This is where a little bit of the problem with the data begins. So what you'll see here is the overall district enrollment at the bottom. So we go from 3,368, and then progressively until this year, we go to 3,132. That's about where we are. And the elementary enrollment, again, we see pretty consistent numbers with Hatch, peaking out in the 2014-15 school year, which is when we had our peak enrollment on the beginning slide, and then we start to see the steady decrease over time. So for Cunha, they also had, at that time when we had our overall unified peak enrollment, they were quite low, and then you saw those numbers grow in the 2015 through 2018 school years, and then we start to see them decline a little bit by year. We're just 6 students less this year at Cunha. And the high schools where we saw the biggest jump in that number. So this year our enrollment at the high school increased 59 students. These are the numbers that don't add up. I'm just like, I should just tell you, right? But the numbers for our elementary we're down 85 students overall this year. For our middle school, we have, it should be less than 6 students. Those numbers were transposed, and we have about 59 more students at the high school. Our budget projections last year were that we would lose about 50 students, so we make up a little money in our budget projections because we only lost between 20 and 25 students. So we make up a little bit based on our budget projections from last year. And this is just an overall map of our elementary boundaries, and just wanted to talk or open the conversation up about enrollment implications. Just briefly highlighting our intra-district transfers. For Farallon View, we have 68 students that travel from Moon Ridge to Farallon View. That's quite a few students. El Granada receives 11 students from Main Street Housing, and Kings Mountain has 31 students that attend from the coast side and go up the mountain every day to attend school. And I know there's obviously some visual implications for this, but I know Dr. Petrich wanted to add a few thoughts.
I do want to comment on this. It's been a few months. I've come to the district, and something that I still am struggling with as an outsider with this picture is the fact that we are transporting students from the very furthest south of the district, namely in Moonridge Apartments, all the way to our school at the very furthest north in the district. I bring it up for two issues. One, because economically, we are at a time when we know our revenues exceed our income. And this transportation costs us a great deal of money. I bring it up secondly on an instructional, and I might dare say a moral calculus. It seems to me that we need to do work to find ways so that every student in this district is able to attend their neighborhood school. When I've been at Fairlawn View over the last few weeks, and I've been there a lot over the last few weeks, I see a lot of students that come off a bus who are tired and who've spent a long time on a bus, and then at the end of the day have to get on a bus and go home again. I don't think it's great for the environment that we have these diesel buses going up and down the highway. And we want to do something to work on that so we have fewer emissions and that we're responsible to the environment. I don't think it's good for our budget that we're spending money on transportation when we need not do so. We might have an alternative. And I just don't think personally, as an outsider looking in, as the superintendent here, that it makes a lot of sense for us to be having some students have access, have choice to a neighborhood school, and some students be traveling this far. I'm going to step up here and use this smart board for a second so I can illustrate my point. Yes, I could do weather. That's fabulous. Thank you. That lightened the moment. Here's Montara. Here's the Fairlawn View zone. It's in blue. Here's El Granada and its zone. And indeed, Heidi Mills has mentioned to me that that zone goes all the way up 92. And here is the hatch zone down below in this other color. But if you see this blue, stop. You'll see a little spot of blue down here. That's Moonridge. There's something really wrong with this picture. To have this zone be up here for Fairlawn View as an enrollment zone, and these kids have to transport all the way up one at great cost to us as a district and at great cost to them. I think we should investigate that. Oh, and I've screwed up your presentation.
I think I did that earlier in the slides, so we're good. You didn't talk about interacting with the board, so I'm going to let that go. I would also add that
Thank you for letting me insert one of
awesome.
my biggest takeaways here in my first 90 days here.
And I would add, we talked earlier, just the impact to our families and their ability to participate in school events and easing that transition for families up and down one. I know we had talked about that earlier, so.
Yeah, and we've talked about it internally as staff. I've talked about it with board members here. I've talked about this with, I want to say, dozens of community members over the past few months in outside agencies, family members, And in fact, we have an appointment, Dr. Patia, at Moonridge with staff there in a week or two. Just nobody has been able to kind of understand, and every time I look for it, I said, is there a reason? Is there a challenge? I just think it's something that the board needs to, and that we as staff will make recommendation about a way that we could save the district money and we could save time in these students' day and make this, I think we can improve in this area.
So I'm happy to entertain any questions.
I think everything you presented was straightforward, and actually, you see the numbers, I wouldn't have known if you didn't mention it. But the trends basically look like what you described, which is like we had like a bolus of elementary kids in 2015 or so. Over the years, as you'd expect, it went up to Cunha, then it went up, as we're seeing now, at the high school. So it's kind of like making its way through the K through 12 spectrum, if you will. So that makes a lot of sense, and it's, I think, really important and really helpful to have a conversation about these trends as well. So I appreciate you bringing it to us. I will just add on the question of the boundaries that you brought up, Sean, is just a couple things. And I know this isn't, like, we're not going to have an extended conversation about it now, but two things maybe to look at are any legal and or ethical ramifications of potential separate but equal situations here, because I've heard a little bit of glimpses here and there that was, these are some principles that can often result in busing kids around in school districts, and also something that, from the legal perspective, make sure that's a kind of kosher approach to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, not making any particular plug for any particular political candidate, but you may know that a particular Democratic political candidate, Kamala Harris, has made this a point in debates to talk about this in her own experience busing in Berkeley. But she would define this as a tool in a district's toolkit to try to address racial segregation and the like. I do not believe that that argument really holds water here. I have heard theories that this happened in the past because Hatch was over-enrolled at the time we saw, and that Moonridge was built later, and that was why the boundary was created. I'm not saying that we need to do anything or fix it right now. I just think it's a point of inquiry going forward, one that I would like us as staff to spend over the next 6 months to determine whether or not there would be cost savings, and if indeed there are legal and ethical implications. I do not believe the district has a consent decree like they did in San Francisco, for example, or in other districts that have had busing. I do not believe that that's true. I've never seen anything about that. Nonetheless, I do think that it's something that we need to look at as a staff.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask about the increase at the high school. Was that just a bigger population that has, we've tracked through the district?
Most people say it's because of John Nazar. Is that correct?
Nicely done. Nicely played.
I think John could answer this question, but I do think that we have students come back to the district for high school. Is that correct? And I know that that's a reason for that jump, I think. So many students go out of district for K-8 and then come back for the high school.
Okay, awesome.
Yes, but I think the demographer data will also show, first of all, I've heard great things about that guy, John Nazar. Second of all, I've heard great things about the high school program, and I hear great things about James Barnes and that middle school program too. But I do think the demographer data, you will see that we've had a cohort that has increased over time, and you're seeing that bubble sort of get to the middle school and the high school level. It's like at that tail end, and that spells trouble for us going forward with regard to declining enrollment. Right now we have increasing enrollment at the high school, but I think in a few years you may see that decrease again. I do think that the high school is a particular draw for a lot of people who may send their kids, and so I hear this hunch, this hypothesis for kids who might go to private school and then come back to the high school. The demographer data may not show that for us.
Look at school age eligible children versus
The demographer data may not show that, but we could probably do that kind of investigation through our counseling staff or through Mr. Nazar to see if there was an increase because of a return from private school or charter school or parochial school, what
And I
have you.
guess what I'm getting at though more is that in those K-8 numbers, are there others that are at private school that's one reason why there's a declining enrollment for those K-8 numbers? And even coming up, that 0 to 5, are we estimating that some of those are then going to private, so that could be one strategy in terms of increasing our enrollment? That's my
I think,
reason for that question. I don't know how you get at that data.
Yeah.
But that's what I was wondering if the demographer would provide that.
I do think also from what I've been told about, you have a couple private schools here on the coast side, but they are K-8 schools, they are not high schools. So that is also part of the return, is that you don't have a local private high school. So people would have to go to San Francisco or over the hill or for that. So I think to some extent, Half Moon Bay High School is the only game in town.
To some extent, just simply looking at their enrollment numbers, which my understanding was at least last year, they were also declining. But that's not good solid data, but that will be like an easy benchmark to see, at least like a simple thing. Looking at census data would also be another benchmark. And we'll have updated data, I don't know when, like in a year or so. So maybe down the road, something to start to dive into more.
The demographer data, again, I've seen a preliminary draft just recently. We will bring that to you, and I think that's going to be very illustrative of the fact that we will face declining enrollment. But remember, you will also potentially have development on the coast, but it will take a while for there to be development on the coast to bring back kids who are school age.
All right, any other further questions, comments? Okay, seems there are none. Thank you very much, Holly. Okay, so Sean, you're up. Item 11C, receive financial overview update. And we do have one green sheet about this, which is from the public here. So I'll call up, I'm thinking before you give your presentation, we can have her give her comment so that you can address the comment and or question as appropriate during the course of your presentation, if that's okay. So Amber Steria, can you come up to the podium, please? So unlike the comments, while she's walking up, I'll say, unlike the comments at the beginning of the meeting, which are not related to items not in the agenda, this item is in the agenda, so therefore appropriate for Sean or others to address the comment from Mr. Young. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. So it's just brief, and it's just, I did it here because I think it is something that you'll probably address as you're going through. But on slide 10, 11, and 12, at the bottom, it says spending estimates are based on review of total employee salaries, wage specific to site, and then in parentheses, including externally funded jobs employed by CUSD. I'm wondering if you, as you're going through, could clarify what are these externally funded jobs? Do they include PTO dollars, CEF dollars? What is making up that external funding? And then clarify why we are including external funding in these numbers or these percentages in the first place. That's my request. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Amber. I think it actually leads up to sort of what I need to explain about some of the rationale here. So again, this is an ongoing financial overview update. Part of the reason that I do this and will be doing this every board meeting, probably through December certainly, is because you will note in the back we have our guests from the San Mateo County Office of Education. Thank you again. They meet with us regularly before these board meetings to try to chart our progress as we're dealing with some budget woes and what I would call a fiscal crisis in the district. So thank you to our San Mateo County Office of Education partners for being here. I do want to say also that we did receive last week and I will agendize a copy of this letter probably going forward. But we did receive a letter of lack of going, let me get this right, a letter of lack of going concern, which basically is a letter coming from the county confirming what we reported to you at the last board meeting with regard to unaudited actuals, the hole we have dug ourselves, the $1.75 to $2.5 million that we must cut assuming we pass a parcel tax, Again, that would be 3.3 million to 4.1 million, I think, if I get that right. If we don't pass a parcel tax and budget cuts. And basically, this letter of lack of going concern says, we are now on report. The Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team will now be assigned to provide us support. The county office is providing us support, and we must make actionable cuts. We must provide an actionable set of cuts for this board by December, again, between the tune of, if the parcel tax passes, $1.75 to $2.5 million, and if the parcel tax doesn't pass, $3.3 to $4 million. So I just want to point that out. I think it's important for us to know that's why we're doing the financial overview update, is because this is a wonderful district, and as I've told everybody numerous times over the past few months, this is a fabulous district with a tiny little budget problem. I say that facetiously. You have a big budget crisis here. The objective tonight is to share an update on potential savings with the board. We've been coming up and providing sort of a picture, a financial picture, I'm doing this in a funnel approach. We're looking at themes tonight, some basic information. Then we will look at more details in November, and then in December bring this menu of cuts based on those details. So we can have a decision on budget cuts by December to stabilize our spending for next year in order to maintain local control and remain fiscally solvent. Again, if we have a conditionally approved budget, if we do not get our act together and fix this expending problem in the district, we do face potentially being taken over and losing local control, and that means a lot to a community. I presented this slide in the past about the financial planning process. Again, the decision and the decision maker in this regard, the decision makers are the board. The staff will present a menu of cuts that the board will choose from, and I already know that I've gone to numerous meetings over the past few weeks where I've had to apologize at the outset of the meeting to say, what I'm about to say you're not going to like. We have arrangements in the district through no fault of the district because of the state's funding of education that simply have caught up to us, and we are going into the red. We showed at the last presentation on audited actuals how we are in deficit spending mode. This is a structural deficit. People have asked me, hey, what if we were just able to raise the $2 million? Would that be good? And I said, well, it'd be great to get $2 million, but we'd still need to make cuts ongoing because you have a structural deficit. You are spending beyond your means. So we will have the board make these cuts, actionable cuts in December. They will act on cuts that are recommended by staff. It's a difficult position for the board to be in. We've been gathering inputs, that's district leadership. I've been meeting with bargaining group and PTO representatives. Over the last couple weeks, I've met with CSEA. I filled this room with CSEA members. I've met with CUTA representatives. I've met with the Empower group. In the last couple weeks, I've met with Kings Mountain PTO. I have a meeting with the Fair Lawn View PTO coming up. I met with Hatch PTO 2 nights ago. I met with Cunha PTO 2 days ago. I met with the Half Moon Bay High School PTO recently. Community groups, I will present to Rotary. I was supposed to meet with the Mid-Coast Council last night and present to them, but of course of the power outage, they canceled their meeting. I did go to City Council to speak about this issue a couple weeks ago. We had the community group, and we've been doing a road show, right? Talking to people about the budget crisis, and then we will continue with this to talk about potential cuts. We are working with the county. We will use Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team to talk about standards and best practices, and of course that's to look at core programs so that we are offering what is that core program, and looking at nice to have versus need to haves. And this will be very difficult, and I understand that it will be very difficult for school communities, for the community at large. The superintendent, that's me, I make a recommendation based on staff presentations to the board about our existing resources, our future needs, proposal for budget cuts. We talk along with district leadership and the board in these venues and in others about why we have to explain the budget cut decisions and our rationale. I don't think anybody at this point is denying the numbers or denying the fact that we have a spending problem and we have a revenue problem because of the declining enrollment, because of the way that the budget is structured by the state. And then we have to implement that. All employees, all community members, everyone on the coast side must ultimately come to understand that we have this need to make budget cuts. I did present this to the financial planning process. When I was at Hatch PTO 2 nights ago, they said, gosh, this is a daunting project. How do you do it? And I brought up this slide. You had a September presentation with our overview update, and we talked about this planning process. This is October. We're looking at some resources and analyzing the resources of the district in big themes tonight. We're gathering input still for the proposed budget cuts that would come in November in more detail. In November, of course, we'll have to analyze the parcel tax election results to see if additional cuts, $1.6 million, are required. I always do this. People are used to me saying this. I'm practiced for years at saying this. I can't advocate for or against a parcel tax, but I can tell you what it means. It's $1.6 million. It's $150 per parcel. And seniors are exempt. SSI disability exemptions exist. No contiguous parcels are taxed. But again, I can't advocate for or against. It's a renewal parcel tax. It's only $150, the same amount that was paid before. It's $1.6 million to us. Again, next month, when we find out those results, we'll have to say, okay, we have $1.6 million more in cuts, or no, we continue to get the same amount of money. We'll get a preliminary report, again, on short-term budget cuts in November. In December, those recommendations on actionable cuts are required by the County Office of Education, and then we'll have ongoing efforts to inform the community and stakeholders of budget cuts. I want to say right now that I have been meeting with groups such as the Boys and Girls Club, the Cabrillo Education Foundation, the Cunha Boosters, Half Moon Bay High School Boosters leadership. We have been talking about the stakes here, so we are talking with groups here, PTOs, et cetera, because I think we will need to keep informing these folks about these cuts because maybe we will be able to backfill somehow. January, March, of course, you have to implement because a lot of this will be staffing. When 82% of your budget is staffing, that means you're going to have layoffs. I think we're estimating that it's probably going to be 20 or more layoffs this year. Very hard. And that will have to be approved by the board in February so that we can make a March 15th notice to those affected employees. If they're certificated, if they're classified, we have a little bit more wiggle room, but we still try to do that. Again, I always talk about this too, about this timeline, January, March. Remember, we're going to make these budget cuts in December. We're going to propose them. The board's going to make actionable cuts. And then in January, you're going to have that, what I call that whiplash moment, because the governor is going to come out and say, oh, but you're going to get this much money in the new budget. And then we have to wait for it, and we have to wait for the ambiguity, because, of course, you have to wait until May to see what the legislature and the final budget shakes out. But again, in January to March, April, all that is implementing and planning, seeing if we can pull back some cuts because we're going to pay for it out of categorical funding, seeing if we can pull back some cuts because of new funding from the state, seeing if we can pull back cuts because benefactors or organizations, agencies will help us with this. I think this is an important thing for us to remember. It certainly helps me about what we're here for. We have to maintain core instructional focus. We have to align and we have to right-size our current operational arrangements to be financially sustainable to meet our needs ongoing. The truth of the matter is, with the staff we have, we can't make ends meet, we can't afford payroll, we'll run out of money, so we're going to have to right-size the district. Remember, 82% of your expenses are staffing. We're going to have to right-size the district. That is hard, I recognize that. As that goes on, I want us to make sure that we're having a continued focus on student achievement, the local control accountability plan, college and career readiness, basically literacy and kids learning, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. That's got to be our focus, right? That's what we're here for. This does represent a partnership between student, family, school, district, and community. I will say that I haven't seen anything like it. I mean, I think the coast side has phenomenal partnerships with the community, phenomenal community involvement, phenomenal staff. We rely on that partnership. We have to have a conscious commitment to learn from the past and prepare for the future. You saw me doing that sort of out loud earlier when we were talking about the enrollment report about, hey, some decisions have been made in the past that I think we need to talk about and potentially address, both for cost savings and also for improvement of student learning and student learning conditions. We have to be very sensitive as these budget cuts personally impact employees and families. I've said this many, many times. I said this in my last meeting with CSEA when we filled this room. I said to CSEA employees, how many of you remember this happening? And they could tell me, I'll forget the dates, 2002, 2009. It seems like every 10 years, and in my career, certainly, I've also received pink slips and been laid off from jobs. It just seems like this is something that we've been dealing with since it's a Prop 13 back in the 70s. Most educators know that we've gone through these cycles, and so CSEA knows that, and I had to apologize to them. I'm very sensitive because I know that this impacts people we know, people whose names we know, people whose children we know, people who have lives, people whose livelihoods will be impacted. I want to keep a conscious commitment for all of us to help keep a growth mindset and for us to have open minds, to not shut down, to think about what if. We try to do that with our kids, with our students. I hope we can all do that as adults. We have to be data-driven. We have to be transparent. We have to be inclusive in our fact-finding, our analysis, our decision-making, and considering the impacts that result from those budget cuts. I do appreciate Amber coming at the beginning of the meeting to talk about, hey, can we look at this? Because quite frankly, when I was at Kings Mountain last week, I did say, hey, we're going to present some rough numbers, and we know we're going to have to refine those numbers and dig deeper on analysis because these are rough numbers. And there are no recommendations for board decision being made today. We're simply just reviewing information gathered so far and brainstorming some big ideas and themes. I want to keep some things out of scope for today and manage our expectations, not just for today, but in general. It says that there are potential opportunities for savings that would require contract negotiations with our employee unions. And just for Heidi and Ramon here, who have spoken earlier, I'm very explicit in that, and in general for all our employees, right? I consider the contract, I've said this, it's kind of old-fashioned, but I consider it a really important document, like a marriage vow. I don't want us to break the contract. And there are going to be some savings that would require contract negotiations, and I don't want to do that in public. I want to do that at the contract, at the table. But that said, there's a parking lot here of some things here. CUTA and CSEA contracts, things like class sizes and employee work days per year and master calendar changes, those are negotiated items and they're outside of our scope tonight. That's something for us to do in negotiations. People can ask questions about it. I would say, hey, we're not negotiating away from the table. We can talk about it as ideas, but we have to deal with that at the table with our partners. Changes in elementary school area boundaries, even though I sort of prognosticated we need to be thinking about that, that's not happening tonight. Graduation requirements, I'll just say it, you could save a lot of money if you dropped your graduation requirements down to the minimum threshold from the state. I don't think it's good for kids. I don't think it's good for college and career readiness. But again, those are things that would require months of discussion with the community before we could look at graduation requirements. But it is something that I think this community should do. I think it's important for us to look at our graduate profile. And there could be savings and there could be better learning from it. And then strategies to increase enrollment, that would need further unpacking. There are restricted funds. These are preschool dollars, adult school dollars, bond dollars, construction funds. That's out of scope for discussion because they're not really able for us to be like talking about cuts to those. That's money we get, but we could shift those costs from the general fund to that. We're looking at that right now. Are there ways that we can spend categorical dollars better? One example that we've talked in the past is, could we invest more in solar energy generation? using bond dollars, which was a strategy when the first solar initiative started here, so that you would save your operational costs. But those are things that we will talk about in future meetings. Sale and lease of capital assets in surplus real estate, that requires a lot of time also. The county office stakeholders have asked me about that. We've talked about that here. I've talked about it at the community meeting in the library. That's something that's not in scope tonight, and it would take a long time. And then new revenue opportunities and partnerships with benefactors, other contributing agencies. Again, we are talking to benefactors and contributing agencies, but that's going to take out time outside this classroom. So here's the 4 core areas of our LCAP. The continued focus on what we need to do and with improvements and how we achieve it. Again, we've talked about this, literacy, students on track early by 3rd grade for future learning. That is a goal for a big lift. That's a goal for us as a district. We know we need to continue working on achieving that. College and career readiness, well-rounded students, academically, social, emotional, physical domains, ready for adult life, citizenship, choice of college career pathways. You saw some data earlier about our UCA to age and completion rates. I would think that we would want to increase that. We'd also want to increase in our ability to have CTE, career technical education pathways. Family engagement, partnership and inclusion. Recently we approved a job description for a job to increase in our family engagement using categorical dollars. That is a strong interest of mine, particularly, and something that I worked on very closely with partners in the past. And then school safety and climate, emergency preparedness, inclusion. These are things that we really need to work on more than ever. Certainly I heard Rachel Sage's comments earlier about Fair Lawn View, and having been on there with Ann and Rachel and staff and the police, sheriffs on that date, and the families affected, we know we need to continue to be prepared for emergencies, and certainly today is an example of that also, right? I often say, I heard this quote somewhere, and I don't usually like a snappy quote, but here's one that I like. One enemy to system improvement is we've always done it that way. If we continue, I think Einstein said it another way, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get better results. We've always done it that way isn't working for Cabrillo Unified. You have to make changes now. And so in some ways, I want us to think about these are opportunities for us to change practices, to improve, to look to continuous improvement. And we should be looking at best practices because those represent potential opportunities for us to improve our results and reduce our costs. I always make the joke, right? A CEO's job is to improve results and lower costs. It seems like alchemy, like it's impossible, but we got to do it. We really have to keep our eyes on results. Some of these topics include technology and operational upgrades, and now here I'm starting to sneak in these themes about what these cuts can look like. We have to be more cost effective, and we have to be more user friendly to reduce maintenance and service costs and to add to student, family, employee convenience. There's some software that we use currently that is redundant. We could save money on that and still achieve the same results using other software. Here's your spoiler alert. When the cuts come, you'll be looking at some software that we're going to say we're no longer doing that. We can save money not doing that year by year, and it doesn't hurt the classroom because we have other things to do. We need to make software improvements. The phone upgrades. We really have an ancient phone system here, and if we could make a phone upgrade in this district for efficiency and convenience and use it for other functionality, we could save some money and have better service. Utility procurement improvements, you've already seen that. Jim Crawford brought to us at the last meeting, Spur, where we were able to save. We're already going to be able to save some money on some utility, on some energy. These existing arrangements, these taken for granted procedures programs must be reviewed now. Some of these existing arrangements, like non-contractual employee stipends, as much as we'd like to keep them, as much as we'd like to offer them, if they're not in the contract, those will probably come on a cuts list. Because at this stage of the game, when you have cuts of this scope, you're just going to have to put a lot of things on the table. And we do have some employee stipends that we pay that are not in the contract, and I have spoken this to my union colleagues. I just want to be very transparent and very clear about this. We will continue to talk about following the contract, but having to give up some things that we're used to doing. Existing meal program or transportation or class offerings, these have been things we've taken for granted and we've always done it that way, or they've built over time. We have to look at that. The transportation I mentioned earlier, we have to look at transportation savings. Meal programs, if there's ways that we can save on meal programs because people aren't buying the meals, we need to look at that. Class offerings, if there are class offerings where they are not efficient and very few people sign up for them, as much as that is difficult for us to say that we may need to cut, we may need to cut them. And other standard practices, quote unquote standard practices. Sometimes we get mixed benefits or bad benefits, or we don't know the benefits, or we just can't afford the benefits. We have to update the facilities master plan. I've been talking about this and harping on this, as people know, for months now, because we have to have a master plan that we know how we're going to spend our bond dollars over the next few years, 4 or 5 longer years, so that we know that the board and the public know how much it's going to cost, why we're doing it, and what gets prioritized. And we have to also use that plan to help us realize additional maintenance and custodial efficiencies and energy savings. And I'll give you an example. In our new schools, we should have net zero buildings. They should be schools that we can operate off, basically as close to net zero as possible, with little cost as possible for energy, as much solar generation as possible, and we should also work on doing that for the environment so that we have green schools. I think this is important for us now to update the facilities master plan so that we have a vision for schools that are sustainable, that are safe, that are rust-free, that are mold-free, that are resilient, and we have an opportunity to do that. That's why the facilities master plan is so important, and we will save money going forward doing that instead of patching what is old ways of doing things. There are updates to curricula and existing practices that are required for us to continuously improve. Some of the initiatives that are underway, like multi-tiered system of supports, like our dyslexia assessments or our literacy assessments, like the ELD master plan that Dr. Bhatia has mentioned, others. These are investments that can yield us savings in intervention dollars going forward. Over time, we can work smarter instead of working harder and paying more. We can also focus on increased early childhood education efforts to help us maintain an equity lens. Preschool, there's going to be more money for preschool, there's going to be more expansion for preschool, and we know that students need early childhood education to be ready to reach our LCAP goal of literacy by 3rd grade and ongoing. We need early intervention so we don't pay extra for late intervention. You will see the downstream intervention cost, I just spoke about that. And if we do these things, I think you can attract families back to Cabrillo to address the trend of declining enrollment. You'll see the last 3 presentations, they all sort of talk to each other, right? So the current budget, district office and services, we are doing a careful review to identify opportunities for savings with minimal classroom impact. All my life I've heard, hey, do it to the district office. There's some data here about that. I want to point out here that there's a current freeze on backfilling most retirements and resignations. I've spoken about this before. We had a network administrator retired, thanked him for his service, congratulations, but we will not be backfilling that position. We are making that savings now. And in the district office, we feel like we can do it. Our colleague Rick Alva and Tino and Eric and Stig have taken more work on for it, but that saves us money. So we have a current freeze on that. There have been other positions that have resigned, and we are just not backfilling them. So at the district office, we're trying to do our part in those salaries and wages savings. We will continue to review additional administrator, including district office position cuts. These could be assistants, the webmaster. I talked about the IT network, areas in special education, mental health, seeing if we can make that more efficient, maintenance, custodial, transportation, teachers on special assignment, overtime. Those are all going to be on the table. I'm talking about it in a big theme, but I'm giving you a spoiler alert right here. See those things? That's coming on a list in November to this board. Those are the kind of things we're going to have to be looking at. All employee benefits, district office, all sites, you'll see that that is a large amount of money. We have to be reviewing our employee health plan options to maintain our services to employees, but to lower our district costs. There are ways to do this where we continue to offer our health plan options, but potentially look to lower district costs. We have to look at doing it. We have to try. If we can achieve it, we can save money. But we want to also be looking, for example, at whether or not we can do it, but we also want to look at maintaining what we have that's contractually required of us. You'll also see that the pension contributions are fixed by California law and they're unalterable. Many of you know that I often speak about this since the Public Employee Pension Reform Act of 2013. Our employees in this district and many districts have gotten raises over the past few years, 5 years, and I always make this joke. I'll look at an employee and I'll say, isn't it great we just gave you a raise? And then in the fall they'll say, yeah, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it. I can look at Sean here, right here, and I know that no matter what raise that a district gives you, and all our colleagues here, I talked about it with John the other day, I talked about it with James the other day, we give a raise, but then the employee has an increased contribution to these pension plans that the state used to give. There's something wrong with that picture. So those costs are not going to change for us. Gavin Newsom gave us a little bit of reprieve on the district end, and the employees have kind of reached the sort of like peak of what they're going to contribute, but the district is going to continue to do that. We can't make that cut. We have to pay it. And I think it is important for us to live up to the California promise that we would have pensions and retirements for our educators when we know that we're not really eligible for Social Security because of the way that our retirements are set up. Same with law enforcement and corrections, et cetera, et cetera. This is a promise that California made to us, and they took it away from us about 5 years ago. So those are things that I'm not going to be able to cut. Those are realities that we have to face with, but I just want to put it out there. And then the services and fees, $6.7 million a year. We have to review our district operations for savings. Those include subcontracts, membership dues, redundant software, use of specific site department budgets, consultants, unused technology. It may be the case that if we have paid for technology that isn't getting used, we're going to abandon that technology. If you don't use it, you lose it, right? So we shouldn't be paying for something that sounded good on paper and doesn't work for us. So that's coming soon too, to a cut list near you. I got my first laugh of the night. I'll do this all week. So you got to laugh to keep from crying. And Amber and I have been through this. It felt like this way last week. Trust me. I mean, oh boy, thank you. Every PTO meeting I have feels this way. I want to give a current budget picture, a big picture overview of our school site spending. Our enrollment continues declining. Have I said that 3 times now, or 3 times in 3 different ways? And our per student spending varies by school site and by size. Our overall district enrollment has been declining annually and more steeply in our elementary schools in particular. That could accelerate or continue because of ongoing socioeconomic challenges, the cost of living. It is getting more and more difficult to live in the Bay Area and in the coast side. Is it gentrifying out here, do you think? Okay, home prices continue to escalate. It is less affordable for many people. And so these socioeconomic challenges you need to know about. Agriculture industry decline. It's a reality. And so these statewide trends also, declining enrollment. I said earlier, we've contracted with a demographer using Measure M funds for our facilities master plan update and ongoing review to help inform our school configuration needs ahead. Our per student spending, employee salaries divided by wages varies. You'll see here that Kings Mountain Elementary School has lower class sizes and few classrooms. That is true. You'll see that El Granada Elementary School includes required special education programs that lifts the cost of that cost per pupil. And Pilarcitos High School is a continuation high school, an alternative high school, also has lower class sizes and few classrooms. I'm going to come up to the board and show this again. Enrollment by site. Half Moon Bay High School, that's your 1 point of increasing enrollment. Cunha, and it's going above, right, the 1,000 mark. Cunha, pretty flat, slightly decreasing lately. Hatch reached a peak. Oh. Hatch reached a peak, now coming down a little bit, has some capacity. El Granada, also declining more sharply. Fairlawn View, also declining. These are the highest enrolled, these are the lowest enrolled. Sneak preview of when you're talking about potential school consolidations, why some schools would be on the list. Kings Mountain, declining enrollment at the smallest size of us, and Pillar Citos, about flat lately, but also small size. If you go up here, well, I'll just show it here. If you go here, you'll see that this is dollar per student salaries divided by wages. We did a very rough cut from some HR data. Half Moon Bay High School, thanks, Rosie. Half Moon Bay High School here is 8% the Cabrillo average of cost per pupil. Pillar Citos is 25% above the district average. Cunha is 5% below. Hatch is 5% below. El Granada is 26% of, sorry, Rosie. El Granada is 26% above the average, but the reason for that again is because of a special education program. Fairlawn View is 7% above the average. Kings Mountain, by rough cut, 38% above the district average. And there's the district average. So that is just some trends and some basic information for you to look at. I think it's important. We will dive deeper into those numbers later. The current budget for intermediate and high schools. There are potential opportunities for us to reduce administrative program and support staff expenditures. These opportunities exist, and they are potential only because we have to do it. Again, I've said this to John and your PTO on Monday, and I said it to James and your PTO on Tuesday. I'm sorry this is the case, but we know that we will probably look to make cuts, and they have to be away from the classroom, and that's going to be to your classified support staff, or it's going to be to administrative or counseling staff. Per student spending, employee salaries divided by wages is slightly higher at Cunha than Half Moon Bay High School, but again, that's because of the economy of scale. The more numbers you have of kids in a school, usually that economy of scale means that you have a lower cost of doing business. Pillar Citos is a higher spending as a continuation school because it has lower class sizes and few classrooms, but again, that's because of individualized attention for students who need an alternative program. I will tell you that when I looked at this, and I won't go up to the board again now, ever again. Yeah, when you look at this, I will say that in my old district, I was actually surprised that the average number of cost for Pillar Citos at about $6,000 per student. That's like half of what we paid for a continuation school. We really contributed a lot at our continuation school in my last district, but it may have been also because we had a specialized program, particularly for a pregnant and parenting teen program. That was cost intensive, right? But the district always felt like, hey, we have to do that. I think most districts are going to look at a continuation school and say, hey, we have to operate that for those students who really need something different so that they can graduate from high school, because that's our business, right? That's what we need to do. But you'll see if you look down there, cost per student, Half Moon Bay High School, Cunha Intermediate, those are our most efficient schools. Pillar Citos costs more. We do need to look at some of these programs because they are just not core programs. They're not affordable. Those include some stipends. Now I'm going to name out one specific, the middle college program for just a few students. I know that we have some high school students who've really enjoyed the middle college program. This is hard for me to say, John, I apologize to you and those students. It particularly hurts me because I used to be an early college high school principal, as you know. I believe there is work that we can do to get students more access to early college experiences, but that program costs us too much money. I guarantee I will be bringing it to you as a cut. There are cost-effective alternatives we're going to need to make, or cuts of programs that will benefit a few students but demand resources that could be used for all. I had this discussion with a PTO president just recently. When a PTO is asked to fund something, they are now looking at the same lens. How much does it do for the collective compared to a special, smaller group? Software redundancies could be addressed through ending contracts to allow for cost savings while still providing the same functionality. Otherwise, I've hit this numerous times. James and John know what I'm talking about. I am particularly talking about ending a contract that we have that is a nice-to-have thing, but it's a redundancy. And then these external funding sources to help fund athletics, to help fund music and the arts, and to help fund other non-core programs with requests of help from local nonprofit partners. I'm already on my hands and knees begging local nonprofit partners, hey, I'm giving you a hint. These are going to be on these cut lists. Will you help us out? The elementary schools, there are potentials for us to find efficiencies to consolidate schools and reduce other costs. As painful as this discussion is, we know that our per student spending, employee benefits divided by wages, and wages divided by number of students, is higher at Kings Mountain Elementary School because of lower class sizes and few classrooms, and at El Granada because of specialized programs, than at Hatch and Farallon View. Just doing a rough cut. Now, I agree with the PTO President Amber, who spoke to us earlier, that there is more work we need to do to show how much contribution is made from commitments from the PTO. But for now, just a rough cut. Some of these programs are more expensive than others. And it's just a simple fact. A student-employee ratio at Hatch results in an economy of scale, which makes that program very efficient. And if I were to go up there again and do my sportscaster, newscaster, weatherman thing, then you would see, look at the left. Hatch is the lowest cost. Farallon View is the next lowest. El Granada is the next lowest. And then Kings Mountain is up there at the highest. So, unfortunately, this results in a redundancy in staffing that could be addressed through new job descriptions to achieve efficiencies of operations at school sites. I will be bringing cuts to this board that will cut some clerical support staff, CSEA members, and that we will look at positions that we could potentially merge. There are cost-effective alternatives that could be realized that would allow for cuts in transportation. I already gave you a hint at what I think one of those moves would be. There are software redundancies. We've talked about that. I'm going to say that over and over again. Easy one at the elementary schools too. And then there are potential external funding sources that could be utilized for reduced staffing and cost savings to the district. And so here's the summary of these big picture themes considered in the budget cut process. Once again, I've said before, the cuts must be significant, between $1.75 and $2.5 million for next year's budget. 1.75 brings us to qualified, 2.5 brings us to positive certification for the county. So, but to remain solvent, we're going to make those number of cuts. Remember, what's going to happen in January? You're going to have this whiplash moment because we're going to get more money from the state. I implore all powers that be for that. And so maybe we'll be able to say, hey, we don't need to make those cuts. But for us to avoid takeover by the County Office of Education and the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, we got to make this. And I also want to just thank our county office partners, because they always kind of look at me and say, Sean, you said the county office about 30 times in this presentation. So sorry, they have a difficult job. It is the state making them do it to us. Contractual and legal obligations will mean available cuts cannot be made that impact class sizes. That's a negotiated item. I'm saying this as I look directly at my teachers, union representatives, and teachers. We can't do that away from the table, but A majority of these cuts then recommended by staff in months ahead will protect those basic classroom services, but as a result, most of the viable cuts must be made outside those core classroom teaching spending. Also, budget cuts to be recommended will address overstaffing, nice to have versus need to have services, inefficiencies and redundancies, and program staff that are not considered to be basic requirements. And that said, we have to acknowledge, and I'll say it again, these cuts will impact staff, they will impact our friends, they will impact our families, they will impact our neighbors, they will impact those people's children and their ability to live on the coast. It will require layoffs. As a school district, when over 80%, 82% of our expenses are in staffing, wages, and benefits, budget cuts of this magnitude simply mean jobs, and I think as a rough estimate, you're going to look at over 20 layoffs this year. So we look forward to providing information in November on reductions at staffing at district office, at school sites, support staff, and in contracts and services to provide the board with a way to achieve the cuts required of us now. If the parcel tax does not pass in November, we're going to have another scenario that would show an additional $1.6 million in cuts to be made, and those cuts would be drastic in comparison to the already significant cuts we must make otherwise. And that's about as much of a downer as I can be tonight.
Thank you, Sean. Point of order on the process here, we just received a request for comment from the public, and I think it's...
I can answer Amber's question
we
again.
can do that now, and then we'll go to the...
I think I did answer this by saying to Amber that we had a rough cut based on HR data that was provided us from employees and wages, and I just asked somebody in HR, bring me a list of all the staff that work at that site on our books, and what their salaries are, and then I just divided, by number of students, the cost, divided by the number of students to get a cost per student. And again, it didn't necessarily include all kinds of other services that we provide, but it was just a rough cut of associated staff. In the case of Amber's question, there are also other staff and other programs that their PTO brings to bear. We would have not included that in that. I'm not sure where the number would go. I look forward to speaking with Amber offline about sort of crunching those numbers with you and bringing it in November. Because I do think to a certain extent, I'll just say it, when I spoke to Kings Mountain last week, there will be trade-offs and questions that the board will have to consider when we talk about school consolidations for any school, about what the trade-offs are, what the risks and benefits, how you could lose students, how you could lose revenue, and that type of thing. But yeah, we gave a rough cut, very rough cut.
Great, and I want to... I think we want to make sure we're not having a conversation open with the public, that we're using our process, the green sheets, and I'm going to assume that Amber's comfortable with her comment and can follow up with Sean afterwards as a process if need be. And so, if that's okay. It's an unusual case that happens, so. Exactly. So I want to honor Christy's request too, and make sure that, again, we can receive all the input from Sean as well as anybody in the audience. So in that spirit, if Christy can come up, and then we can open for discussion.
And as you do, I just want to remind the public, it is not standard practice for a board or a superintendent to speak directly to audience members, because I know many of you in the audience now. I do it anyway in a sort of general, I'm speaking to the public, I'm speaking to the board, I'm answering questions, but we are not taking it back and forth with particular people. We are just speaking to the questions.
Great. Thank you. Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Walker, and I'm a parent at Kings Mountain and part of the site council and the PTO there. And I'm a little concerned about the numbers that were represented tonight about some of the cost per student, and I wanted to just point out that the KMAP, which is their PTO up there, has been very successful in raising money for the school, and as a result is contributing a fair amount of money. We estimate this year that our amount that we're going to be supporting the school at is about $1,600 per student. So if you add that number to the graph that's on page 12, it brings us back down to about roughly, I can't tell exactly what the numbers are from the little graph, but roughly into the ballpark of where the averages are. So, and I know, I appreciate that Sean is going to be doing some more figuring and so forth, but it makes me nervous to leave that big number in your minds for a month before you get that data again. So I wanted to add that to the discussion. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, so as this is a discussion item, or I guess technically presentation, but open for discussion, we'll open the floor to the board for comments and questions for Sean.
Thank you, Sean, for all of the analysis and possibilities there. I think what would help, since we have to make those caveats that, like for example, El Granada, where we have special ed, if we could level those, like if we could pull that out, since that's a specialized program, I think that would be appropriate.
And please know again, as I described the funnel procedure, this was big themes tonight. We'll get to specifics in November and try to crunch the numbers and sort of pull that out. And future slides hopefully will be school by school, which I think will help illustrate the issues. And again, I think everybody does want to go immediately to how this will impact them, how it will impact their school. I think that's totally normal. But we will look at this in more specifics going forward.
I just want to comment, again, kind of related to Kim's question, an appreciation, and related to my comment earlier with Dr. Bhattia's presentation, you know, exactly what you described, Sean, sorry, I know I always need to get closer to the mic, which is kind of taking us through that stepwise process, carrying us along with your journey, if you will, as you've been on board, what is it, August, September, October, 3 months or so, and have learned so much and brought so much to us and carrying us and keeping us updated with what you're finding along the way. I think that's really tremendous, as Leticia was doing earlier, with like, okay, the hot off the press, and then this is a process, right? This is not like a one and done deal where you come once and then like a year later you come back with the same 3 slides. It's a process as you learn, you share, and just the list of community groups and school groups and individuals that you've had an opportunity to speak with and have some undoubtedly really hard conversations with already just in the past, you know, weeks, months, I think speaks a lot to my confidence in our ability that this is hard and very difficult for all the reasons that you spoke to earlier, but is, you know, we don't have a choice, again, you know, that we have to go through this at this time, but, you know, will it kind of open a new way of working together as a community more broadly, not just as employees or a board, but just with our community and with partners, to just continually think outside the box, right? And continually, you know, as you said, also challenge how we do things like all the time, right? And if we find things that work, okay, keep it going, but keep asking, is this still working for us? Is this still serving us? And continue to evolve and have those longer term goals that we know is going to take us years to get to, but have that as our guiding light and kind of work towards that. So, and using that, the real data that you've shared with us today already, and we've started to see with the enrollment numbers even that Holly presented to us, I think is, you know, puts us on that path towards what you describe in terms of having that process be clear, so people know this is how it's going to happen, and you're carrying us through it every month, and it's inclusive, because people are having the input and the say as is relevant and appropriate, and driven by data, right? With all the caveats that those data are, knowing that the data is this, it's not that, and if we need that, then that's the next stage, and we dive into, you know, the PTO funding or whatever the situation is. So, you know, I just want to, you know, thank you for that, and helping us get on that path to where we need to be. And also thank you to, as you referenced, our county representatives. My assumption is that they are working with you along the way on this step 2 and are supportive and, you know, supportive of this process and the data that you have so far.
And I do look forward to ongoing work with the county office to brainstorm ways to achieve the cuts and savings we need to make to get back to solvency. And I do also look forward to working with the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team and their expertise, because I think we need it now, especially as we try to show the rationale for cuts we have to make in the months ahead.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that finishes up item 11. Item 12 is discussion items. There are none for today, so we'll go to item 13, starting with board members. Want to start, Freya?
So real quick, before everybody slips out, measure I, measure I, measure I. I hear these numbers and I stay awake at night sometimes thinking about both the 1.7 to 2.5, but really the 3.3 to 4.2. The idea of cutting 4.2, even given what you've talked about and the fact that we're trying to keep our base principles and our direction and look at efficiencies and other things, is almost impossible to not really cut to the core with 4.2. I can kind of see 1.7, we can make these efficiencies, we can find areas, we can hope the state comes back and the community partnerships, and you can kind of see a road forward. And so that's why I've been working really hard over the last couple of months on Measure I, and I just want to put a plug in. We've all got our ballots in the mail. Let's get our votes in as soon as we can. Vote early, vote often, not vote often. That wouldn't be legal. But that's what I keep thinking, right? And you know, I just want to remind everyone. Yes. Vote every election. Vote every legally allowable time that you can vote. Just to be clear. So voter turnout is going to be vitally important, and as all of you are supporters of the schools, it's just going to be that time to remind everybody to vote as early as they can, get those ballots in. So wanted to put a plug for that, and also as part of that, it's a thank you, because none of this is any one individual. It's not the board, it's not the district, it's not even just our staff, it's our whole community that has come together time and time again over the last 10 years or more to support these schools. And I just want to say thank you to that community that keeps coming out and saying, yes, we believe in you, not just you, but the children. We believe that the children are our future. And thank you to the Half Moon Bay Review for their endorsement this week, which talked about that and the cliche of that, and the fact that it's a cliche because it's real. The children are our future, and if we don't invest in them now, we will reap the negative consequences of that later. And I just want to make that plea to our community to continue to invest in all of our children, because they are our future. So that's all. Thank you.
Love those buttons. I want to ditto what Freya just said. Ballots are on my dining room table.
Tonight, when you go home.
Yes. I already saw Sophia's post, and she's already done hers. This school district is amazing. I didn't run for this position until my kids were out of the district. And so while not perhaps as severe across the board, I've lived through a couple of cuts. Times when in elementary, the dual language program at El Granada was cut. And, you know, there were those instances when I felt it dramatically when it impacted my kids. But our kids are also resilient. And systematically, I can't say enough good things about our teachers in this district. And that, you know, I can remember being a kindergartner parent once upon a time, and you don't know what you don't know. And I am so grateful to this whole system. You know, it's, for a small fishbowl, we keep a lot of things cooking here. And it is at the, it's because of our PTOs, and it's because of CPF, and the camaraderie and this knitted community we have. So what I would also ask is that while we are going through all of this, I had conversations with both Sean and Leticia, Drs. McFetridge and Dr. Patia, to honor you know, we have great guns in our administration now. And the depth of their understanding about learning and what's best for kids, I have no doubt that there is a thread running. While we're making cuts, they're building the foundation that's sustainable.
absolutely, I hear it in the one-on-one conversations, that we're building that stable foundation. Yes, there's gonna be a lot that jars right now, but that foundation is being built that's sustainable, that we're still gonna have successful graduates. Kids are resilient. You know, I think it was always easier on my kids than me, watching dynamics. And so, I just ask everyone to assume noble intent and know that we're looking at something that, we're looking at this strategic planning, and no one on this board ran because we wanted to make cuts in the district. You know, we wanted to celebrate it, and I can't say enough for what Freya has done over the years in terms of the support of various measures and, you know, being part of getting this, the initial parcel tax. So renewing the parcel tax is really a big deal. Thank you.
Can I ditto Kim's ditto of Freya and Measure I? So Freya, I'm not even gonna try, you were very eloquent. The other thing I wanted to say was I just wanted to really thank Sean for jumping right in. I couldn't have asked for more of jumping right into what's going on here, head first, diving right into the pool, and finding it so much out and talking to so many people and building so many bridges. So I know you've been out a lot of evenings doing lots of things, so I just wanted to thank you for that and thank you for all the hard work. It was a hard situation to walk into, and I think you've done a wonderful job.
I'll, of course, echo vote. I think I did probably vote within 15 minutes of getting the ballot in my hand. I literally carried it, dumped the recycling, walked to the coffee table and saw it was just that one thing, which made me really happy because it was like super easy to just fill in that one yes, in just in case anyone wasn't sure which one to fill in. The yes on I part, sorry, I'm just informing what would allow us to continue the $1.6 million revenue stream. I'm not advocating either. But I don't know if I can hear.
Oh, I am, yes. You're political.
Okay, well, okay, there we go. Okay. So, but in addition to that, I really do want to thank slightly in advance for a hopeful outcome of that measure on the ballot, but also really for the last several months, as it's become apparent the challenges that face us from the financial perspective. I want to thank, of course, Sean and the leadership team, you know, here at the district and in the schools, and every single person that's working in the front lines, if you will, with our students, knowing what's like behind us and trying to hold it together, because resilient as our students are, we do want to make sure we're supporting them as grown-ups. But I also want to thank just our community members, especially you guys who are here today, and just to see this like increase in like earnest, honest, noble intent kind of engagement from our community has been really, really encouraging. And the number of people that are reading board packets and like coming to meetings and like asking hard questions and standing up with feedback or questions, like to me has been a real gem in this process. And if that's like a silver lining, if we can maintain that and continue to have that as a process, not just when things are hard and we're like worried about bad things happening, as of course we all are, staying up at night worrying about these like horrifically large numbers, but also just as we keep a steady state and continually improve, right? So that we don't get to the point where we say, okay, we're good now, I can go back, like watch my TV shows, you know, we're just gonna end early these board meetings because I wanna be home by 9, whatever. Like we gotta keep this momentum going in terms of community engagement, because it's absolutely essential that people, you know, that we're all doing whatever we can, and whatever privileges we have, we leverage those for the greater good of all the students on their coast, not, you know, just smaller groups that we're particularly affiliated with, but all the students on the coast. And for some people, that's just, you know, and I think I get a question a lot of like, well, what can I do? I don't know, it's frustrating, I'm kind of overwhelmed. And I think it really depends on like what one's interests are, what, you know, just being curious, right? And that's a first starting point, like having the thought of like, maybe I'll find out what this board does, right? Or how the district works, or how the school works. asking questions and getting some information, which is, I think, a phenomenal next step, and then being equipped to take action and do something about it, right? Figuring out based on your interests and what you know and what you have, if it's time or money or votes that you can give, right? Like what, if that's all you can do is like write a couple checks and vote in every single election, so you're voting often in an appropriate way, that's something to do, right? Great, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you can give some time to a classroom and that's what makes you happy, like that has value. If you can come to our meetings and like tolerate being here, you can manage that, juggle that with your family and like understand where we're looking at numbers and start, maybe even if at first it's kind of overwhelming and intimidating. Like I'll tell you, the first time I looked at a board pack, I was like, oh dear God, it's like 400 pages. And the financial stuff is really interesting once you get into it, but it takes a while to like start to get used to it and ask for definitions, right? What does PLC mean, right? So I just want to express that gratitude for those members of our community that that have and are giving what they have in all those different ways, because these are our schools, right? There's no they. This is like all ours. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for that. So that's that. So we will go next to the student board member, Lauren.
Okay, so yeah, let's just get right into it. Here's an update of the current happenings at Los Listos. During circle time, we talked all about our families and who are the people that make up our family. We learned about the pumpkin cycle and took a trip to Farmer John's pumpkin patch. We will continue practicing our names and alphabet using zoo phonics. Parents have begun to sign up to volunteer in the classrooms and are learning how they can be active participants in the child's education. The books for the month include La Viejita que no la tenía, Miro a Nadie, Go Away, Big Green Monster, Calabazas, La Calabaza, and El Ciclo de Vida. The songs this month are Five Little Pumpkins Sitting on a Gate, a classic, Los Pollitos Dicen, Pío Pío Pío, Los Días de la Semana, and Teasing Mr. Crocodile. Exciting things have been happening at Kings Mountain Elementary School. The annual Stone Soup performance will be happening on November 22nd. Make sure to save the date. The Kings Mountain Elementary School community welcomed back former students Joseph and Julian and their family who are originally from Guatemala and are now living full-time in Guatemala City. Students prepared questions about the food, school, and culture of Guatemala and made cards for the boys to take home. Our very own Tyler Elliott is the runner-up for favorite teacher in the Half Moon Bay Review's annual Reader's Choice poll. Tyler was the top CUSD finisher. We are enjoying our brand new picnic tables, courtesy of KMAP. Special shout-outs to Ben Rosner, Jean Newhall, and Scott Meanery for the heavy lifting and assembling. We are still celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month at Hatch. Congratulations to the Hatch students winners of the art contest. Mr. Ogario, Ms. Skinner, and Mrs. Arkell's class had the most participants. Hatch hosted the BMX assembly performance on wheels. Students learned some tricks when using their bicycles and safety tips as well. Thank you to Ms. Carleen for bringing this amazing performance to Hatch Elementary. We had the pleasure to have Kid Power at Hatch again. Miss Irene gave us a variety of strategies for students and teachers to increase safety and as an anti-bullying campaign. Zumba and yoga classes start at Hatch every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Please come and join us for a fun and relaxing workout. Thank you to Mrs. Long for providing this fun activity for our Hatch community. Parent-teacher setting goal conferences were just held last week. Teachers and parents had a great opportunity to strengthen their relationship as a working team for student success. Thank you, Hatch teachers, for your time and dedication. Hatch celebrated International Walk and Roll to School Day. This event was a huge success, and we beat our previous record with a total of 216 students versus 197 from last year. Huge thank you to our ELAC parents for their participation, Mrs. Lane, Mrs. Cortez, Ms. Carleen, Dr. McFettridge, and Hatchie. We are looking forward to our first PTO movie night on Friday, October 25th. Students will be able to bring blankets and pillows to the multi-purpose room and enjoy with their family. Snacks, popcorn, and pan dulce will be provided. Thank you, ELAC and PTO parents. El Granada just wrapped up a successful conference week with over 90% of parents attending goal-setting conferences. We have some great field trips planned for October. Kindergartners are going to Farmer John's as part of their science program. The third graders are going to the Woodside store as part of their social studies program. And fifth grade is going to Santa Cruz Bay to experience sailing in a catamaran. On October 23rd, Miss Ladd will be hosting a tea and talk on school safety. And finally, on October 25th, our fifth graders will be docents for our school-wide family math night. Cunha sent off 146 graders to outdoor education last week at Jones Gulch YMCA camp near Memorial Park in Loma Mar. Our admin and counseling team visited them, and they were having a great time. We got them all back safely, and our teacher team up there reported that this was one of the easiest times they've had. What a great class. The Outdoor Ed program, run through San Mateo County Office of Education, is one of the most important events of our year. It has a transformative effect on students, many of whom may have never been away from home and parents for so long before, and especially for those students who have never had the opportunity to go out into the forest and learn about ecology and the environment. They were supervised by a fantastic group of high school students who volunteered to be cabin leaders and graciously gave up a week of school to work with our kids. Our program is coordinated by Matt Ripberger, who put it all together and did an amazing job. The Cunha PTO completed its annual giving drive with nearly $60,000 raised for programs that benefit our kids. Thanks to everyone who gave, and our students are being rewarded with an inflatables day this Friday during PE. Also on Friday, our leadership kids have organized Colors Day to celebrate LGBTQ+ History Month, and will be passing out donut holes with rainbow sprinkles. Over the past month, Half Moon Bay High School has had plenty of exciting events happening around campus. 20 of our senior students attended the outdoor education program to be cabin counselors for the 6th graders from Cunha. They spent a week full of fun, learning, and appreciation for nature at a YMCA camp in Loma Mar. Last Sunday, our Cougar Boosters group hosted the 2nd annual Golf Classic to raise funds for our athletic program. How'd you do, Mr. Nazar? I forgot to ask you.
I didn't play in this.
Oh, you didn't play in this one?
No, but I was down there as the greeter and send them off. And, Dr. Wade did play.
Oh, really? How'd you do? Last Sunday, we hosted the 25th annual Pumpkin Classic Volleyball Tournament and the famous Artichoke Invitational on our campus. I think there were over 3,000 runners at the Artichoke Invitational. It was crazy. In other sports news, our undefeated football team plays away versus the Hillsdale Knights tomorrow evening. Also, our very own member of the stellar girls golf team, Mitzi Hernandez, shot a hole-in-one at the match versus Cappuccino. Every Wednesday, students that belong to the One of a Kindness campaign, an organization to promote the message of kindness on our campus, and Vape Escape, a group making efforts to minimize and eliminate the use of vaping devices within our student body, meet together and work hard to achieve the goals of these important groups. Lastly, we will end this month of October with our annual Homecoming Week. It will be a thrilling week full of fun games and activities, an action-packed homecoming assembly, an exciting Friday night football game, and a homecoming dance where I can hopefully get Mr. Nazar out on the dance floor to show some moves.
Oh, you're killing me.
La Costa Adult School currently has approximately 135 students enrolled in its programs, which include HSE preparation, GED, and HiSET, ESL, 6 levels of English, and Spanish, 2 levels. We have expanded our HSE program for the 2019-20 school year in order to meet the scheduling needs of students who are wishing to gain their high school equivalency. As well, we are developing 3 CTE, career and technical education programs to help our students obtain jobs and or advance in their careers. These include customer service and hospitality, maintenance and groundskeeping, and modern office technology, currently held at the Half Moon Bay Library. You can find out more about our school by going to our new website, reading our recent flyer in the Chamber of Commerce quarterly newsletter, or by reviewing our ad in the Half Moon Bay Review twice a month. And see, there's a lot going on in the district, a lot of exciting stuff. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Lauren. Sean.
First of all, I want to give great thanks to our staff, our families, our students. for their cooperation and patience during these past few days of ambiguity because of the PG&E shutdown. Despite the challenges, I was heartened to see people working together to keep students learning in safe and supervised school environments. I know, having kept schools open during smoke season last year and a couple of years ago, and also during what they called Stormageddon a few years ago, these are not easy times for teachers and for support staff and for our administrators, or for anybody in district office for that matter. These are very difficult times. I really appreciate everybody coming together as a team to work on this. And that includes my colleagues here. I got to see Heidi Mills singing with the kindergartners, I believe, this morning. Brought me joy. And I got to see you this morning. I got to stop by all the elementary schools on the highway, at least today. So thank you guys for making that work out. I also want to speak to the patience and understanding shown by families, children, and staff during what was a very difficult and frightening lockdown at Farallon View. I was there to see the partnership and cooperation shown on that day. I was impressed by the immediate and strong show of support by San Mateo County Sheriff's Department. I appreciated families who waited patiently and cooperated with law enforcement and with school staff and with Ms. Childer on that day, recognizing how emotionally charged those moments were. When Rachel Sage stood up earlier and spoke, I'll admit it, I got a little teary-eyed because, of course, what we were all thinking about is, texting people and saying, hey, this happened and I love you. That was a very tough day. And meeting with the PTO later, meeting with the PTO President Kelly Hoffman-Davis and with Ann Childer, Micah Woong, others, to talk about next steps we have to take at that school to keep improving our communication, keep improving in our drills, as well as it was and worked out. There's always more work for us to do in all our schools with implementation of the San Mateo County Big Five school safety protocols, and this is why we drill with students regularly. I know there is much more to do ahead, but we continue working at improving in our responses by continuing to practice our drills and these responses to these safety concerns. I want to remind folks we will be engaging in a great shakeout earthquake drill next Thursday. I've mentioned it in my last letter. I just want to make sure people remember, we do drills, we have to be prepared. Our schools have shown, have documented and shown, exhibited great preparation. I thank our teachers, I thank our principals, I thank our support staff, I thank our families and our kids. I thank everybody for helping out in these times of real trial and challenge. I also want to note, as we've heard from Lauren, we are celebrating the final week of Hispanic Heritage Month, which ends October 15th. And we're also celebrating LGBTQ History Month. And so I'm very pleased at the work of partners, whether it was ALAS, Ayudando Latinos a Soñar, during Hispanic Heritage Month, or whether it was Coast Pride as our partners. I was very impressed that the city of Half Moon Bay made recognition of these things. I was very impressed that we had a pride flag hanging out in front of the district office. And I wanted to thank John Nazar, too, for the events that I know that he's hosting on the campus tomorrow, I believe, and the work that he's done with students recently. Thank you for stepping up to that. Just really heartwarming. I told you about the letter of lack of going concern from the county office. Budget cuts are real. I've had most of my meetings in the past few weeks about that. I've had PTO meetings at Farallon View, at Hatch, at Cunha, at Half Moon Bay High School, and at Kings Mountain. I met with Saul Lopez, captain of the San Mateo County Sheriffs, yesterday. I spoke at City Council last week. I met with the Financial Advisory Committee last week. I met with CSEA leaders. I met with CUTA leaders this last month. I was very lucky to go to Hatch Walk and Roll to School Day. That was joyful to start a day last week. I talked about the Finance Committee. I met with the Cunha Athletic Boosters. I met with 3 different sets of architects. I met with the San Mateo County Office of Education Superintendent Nancy McGee, who has been of such great support to us. The Environmental Literacy Coordinator and lead there, Andra Yugoyan, to talk about things we can do to make the district greener, and their communications team on how we can improve in our communications. We met with Assemblymember Mullins. Thank him for helping represent us in the county. We had our Big Lift County Collaborative meeting. We met with Coast Pride. I met with Boys and Girls Club and Cabrillo Education Foundation with our board president, and I was meant to meet with Mid-Coast Council last night. They canceled, but I did get to meet with our representatives, and I look forward to getting them some of this good news I'm spreading everywhere. And that ends my report.
Thank you very much. All right, so we'll move to item 14, consent items. Do we have a motion to approve? Okay, do we have a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 4 + 1 to 0, because we lost Lizette a while ago on the phone. Okay, and item 15, action items. 15A, approve the amendment to the consolidated application to receive additional funds under Title III Immigrant and Title IV programs.
Thank you. So this memo is to ask for the amendment of CARS, which is the Consolidated Application and Reporting System. And through CARS, the California Department of Education will list a menu of categorical funds. Title I is for low-performing students. Title II is for professional development. Title III, there's two types of Title III. Title III English learner and Title III immigrant to support English learners or immigrant students. There is a new title, categorical is called Title IV for student supports and academic enrichment. And again, I have also only been here about 3.5 months or so. And so as I'm discovering, I came up to I do also oversee categoricals. As you know, there's a position that we did not rehire, and so I've absorbed all of those opportunities, call them. And as I'm discovering, I noticed that in the CARS application that you had already approved in June, we did not select to receive a Title III immigrant and Title IV student support and academic enrichment grant. And so I am asking that the Cabrillo Unified School District Board of Trustees approve the amendment, because this does need to be approved in order for us to go in and change the amendment of the application so that we can receive Title III immigrant funds, which is a total of $7,049. And again, Title III immigrant is not migrant education funding. That supports our migrant students. Title III immigrant supports students, they might duplicate with students that have been in the U.S. 0 to 3 years. And although it's not a lot of money, it's $7,049 less of cuts that we need to make out of the 1.76 million, should the parcel tax.
Every bit helps.
So, Title IV, it's a new categorical fund. It's Student Supports and Academic Enrichment Grant. And basically it has 3 buckets, but the major bucket is to support and enhance enrichment opportunities. And Trustee Hines, this includes VAPA and STEM.
Visual and performing arts and science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
The acronyms, I have to remember the acronyms, because educators speak with acronyms. And I was going to say SEL, social emotional learning. So it does include anything above and beyond the core. And so although again, it's not a lot, it's a start. It's $14,269. And so I do ask if the Board of Trustees approves our amendment to the CARS so that we could receive this additional funding.
Great, thank you very much, Leticia. Do we have a motion to approve? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, questions or comments?
Just to clarify.
My understanding is that we've already gotten agreement that this is okay to amend this at this time, and so that these funds will be coming once we've approved it.
Yes, I
So
went to the
good
head
job
of California
already.
Department of Education and got the yes.
Okay, good. Just saying
Yes.
good job already. Thank you.
All right, so if there are no further comments or questions, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 4 + 1 to 0. Thank you, Leticia. All right, next item, approve the third amendment to the cell site lease. Jim?
Yes, this is the agreement with the AT&T cell tower that's located on the high school grounds. On it, relocating it about 50 feet over from where its current location is. The only change really in this agreement is the date of completion. Originally, I think it was about August, and they're moving it to December for completion of the new tower, and then taking down the old tower by January of 2020 on it. So just some minor adjustments. They were delayed by DSA in getting the project going. And so this just adjusts for those timelines.
We have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Questions or comments? I have a question just out of curiosity, because I looked through the document. I don't know if I was blind and I just didn't see it, but I assume that AT&T is paying some kind of fee for that, or is that just an entitlement they have to put cell towers for some reason where they want to?
Well, this agreement, I think it actually ends in about around a year or so. So at that time, the tower can be completely removed and the equipment off the site. I'm assuming we're getting, we'd have to go back and check, but I'm assuming we're getting a regular revenue from the tower. That's pretty customary for school sites to be paid to have these towers on the site.
I wasn't sure. Okay. Yeah, because I was looking for that, and I didn't see it in there. So the scope of this was just for the project to move it.
To relocate it,
The
yeah.
relocation. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I'm just curious too, do you happen to know which way they're moving it?
I do.
Okay.
So
Just 50 feet was more than I thought, I'm curious.
Yeah, if you're familiar where the current location is of the tower, it's moving on the access road between the baseball diamond and the football field, right where the equipment that runs the tower is sitting. It's going to be in the same sort of cage right there. They're just putting it all together in one spot.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, since there are none, let's move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 4 + 1. I think I heard Lauren say that. Okay, 4 + 1 to 0. Okay, thank you, Jim. Okay, and item 15C, adopt resolution number 25-19, affirming Mr. James Crawford's role on District Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and approving independent contractor services with Crawford School Business Consulting LLC.
So first of all, I just want to say this is coming in part. I want to thank and just commend James Crawford for serving as our interim CBO during a tough time. As you know, James, I know this is difficult probably for you to hear me say it and have to listen to it, but here we go. So James had a CBO, had been a veteran CBO for years and years and years. And after retirement, we were lucky enough to see his application. And so he's been our CBO, but this is his last performance here. And we are currently interviewing for a permanent CBO in the district. This resolution and this contract would allow Mr. Crawford to remain on board to help us with independent contractor services in oversight of construction management, basically. It would be far less than paying a construction management firm. So there's that. There's also added into that coaching services in the contract, where he would be able to provide coaching services to a new CBO once hired. And the fee is standard. In fact, it's less than what we paid in a previous district for coaching services for a new CBO. And then there's also services there about working on insurance. As you know, Mr. Crawford has already helped us with a couple things to help with oversight and controls for spending, and particularly with contracting with Spur to get us lower utility costs. So the majority of the funding used would be for bond funds for this contract. He would also serve in a role on the district's Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, and that's something he has experience from in his past district. And I think there would be great value in approving this contract. I would recommend it because I think it is in par with the going rate of a CBO, former CBO of his experience, and in this kind of consulting contract. And I would also recommend that you approve it because I know that we will get a chance to make savings, including applying for state grants, which we have not applied for in this district for years, as I understand it, which could be many, many dollars that would be going towards our construction.
All right, thank you, Sean. Do we have a motion to approve? Second? Okay. Questions or comments?
I just want to comment that I really appreciate that your willingness to continue on in this capacity. It's nice to have that consistency given the amount of changes that we've had and the crisis that we're looking at. And I want to thank you for your service as CBO and helping to pull the numbers together as we look at potential cuts and look at our budget and kind of face the reality of it. And it'll be nice to have that consistency moving forward. So.
Just to add on to that, the consistency and the experience that you bring to the table too. So I'm glad you can stay.
Same, of course. I think, again, like Sean, and I think you've kind of jumped into with Grace a very challenging situation and done a lot in a very short period of time to help us start to sort through what we've got and what we need and directions we might go to get there. So I definitely want to, thank you, Jim, for that, first and foremost. And just kind of, again, looking at the numbers and thinking about how things, in our scheme of what we're trying to do, my understanding from the memo, or the contract, I think it was in the memo, in terms of like kind of the overall contract values, we're looking at 2-year contract, $118K per year. Just thinking about other things that, kind of are going on at the same time that relate to this idea of construction management is the position that was recently vacated by our construction manager. So is my understanding correct in that this is kind of like, the numbers are pretty similar from what I understand. So this, in terms of like cost neutrality, is what we're looking at here, right? With those two positions being that we're kind of shifting that expenditure to the need that we actually have right now. So we don't have a lot of tactical stuff going. We do. We always have, like, we're building Hatch Kinder, we're doing stuff everywhere. But like right now, what we really need is to figure out how we're going to, spend our bond money. And Jim will be presumably part of that, working with the committee, working with us, working with mostly you, Sean. That's kind of what we need now. So we're basically kind of, looking at the opportunity for a cost neutral shift as part of almost a reorganization to like think about what we need and to do so in an economical way where there's no additional cost, because we can phase out, as you said earlier, a position that we no longer, that we can live without, in favor of something that we really need right now. Is that, like, am I understanding correctly what we're looking at?
You are understanding correctly. We did have someone who was helping us with construction oversight, sort of on a day-to-day operations level, but not on a strategic level. I did speak to a construction firm about construction management and hiring that out, which other districts have done. That can be 10% of your whole bond costs. So over the cost to your time of the bond, that could be $10 million. It is much more cost effective to have that work done by someone with expertise that does it on a consulting basis working for the district. So yes, we did have someone resign. Mr. Crawford has more expertise. We are closing up some construction projects currently, as you know, like Hatch. There will be new buildings there, new footings being poured right now. Cunha finishing up, and Mr. Crawford has been instrumental to us, like trying to finish up some of the punch list on the Cunha Building C, bringing that back. Interacting with the architects, interacting with the construction companies, and interacting with the Bond Oversight Committee. And again, those would be Measure M dollars, and it would be a fraction of what we would cost us if we were to do construction management. And then when the time comes that you have a facilities master plan and heavy construction gets underway, staged again, and that could be months and months and months ahead from now, then at such point you would probably need someone added on for day-to-day stuff, but this is more strategic, and particularly for accessing state matching funding, construction funds, construction bonds, which again the district has not gotten, and that could mean as many as millions of dollars to us. And again, most of the cost out of this contract is out of Measure M, and so it doesn't affect the operational budget, and wouldn't be money that we could spend for our operations anyway.
Very good. So kind of to that point of like most of the money being from the bond, the combined fund, whatever's left from S, and the totality of M so far for the bonds that we've sold already. Kind of related to that coaching piece, like, because presumably we'll be hiring a CBO that does not have the extensive decades of experience that Jim does, and so I assume that's the rationale for helping somebody come up to speed pretty quickly to leverage not only his knowledge of the district in the short period of time that he's been here, but also things like insurance or other operational aspects like the power piece that you brought to us previously. This like out of the box thinking of like not just kind of like plugging along the way we've been doing things, right? But thinking like, well, if we switch this supplier and negotiate with this, all that kind of stuff that I'm sure you're really good at, that I appreciate, that's the kind of thing where it's not only the cost neutrality as far as the direct expenditure for the contract, but also like the upside, the big upside in terms of revenues on the one side and cost savings for our budget. So kind of helping to bring those numbers together more so, be it general fund or be it bond fund, I think it's all taxpayer money that we're really sensitive in terms of how we spend it. So, despite having a little bit more wiggle room in one bucket than the other right now, I think it's our fiduciary duty to monitor both and make sure we're spending those appropriately. So, sorry, that's a long one to just say, like, basically the coaching is because, like, we're probably going to hire somebody a little bit more junior that will help appreciate the strategic support.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is, Cabrillo doesn't pay people because of the resources that we have in this district well, and so it's difficult to recruit people with a lot of experience. And so every CBO that is hired, and this happened in my own last district too, it was somebody who had a lot of chops, a lot of skills, but needed a coach to be able to do the whole full complement of the job. And again, I know it's hard for Jim probably hear me like wax poetic and like praise him here. Sorry. But, I know I've worked with CBOs, I've worked with very experienced, qualified CBOs. Jim is one, and whatever CBO we get in is going to be able to learn how to help us do the things we need to do to save money, to get us back into solvency, to help with solar generation, to help with running bond oversight, to help with construction management, facilities management, looking at how we're going to save in a custodial maintenance program, looking how we're going to save in a transportation program, look at how we're going to be able to get funds from the state, again, bonds that, funding from the state that we are due and that could greatly benefit us. So, yeah, I think this is an investment that will probably pay off maybe tenfold, maybe 100-fold.
And as far as the split between general fund and bond fund, it sounds like most of it's going to come from the bonds. So it'll be the majority of the work will be around that management. Like, just an operational question, like how do you iron that out? It's like on a monthly basis you do the appropriate split, or you'll kind of sort that out, like as far as what the percentages will be on each part of it, or?
As a consulting contract, I mean, this is a consultant contract. This is, you know, a flat fee, and Jim's going to be on call for us to do these things.
Very good. My last question on the coaching thing, just thinking about, like, just, again, moving forward, having a CBO come on board, do you anticipate an evolution of what that person will need? And so, like, at the beginning, maybe they'll need a lot more, hopefully by the end of 2 years, they're like a little bit, have their feet under them a little bit more. Do you expect that will change? And,
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to let Jim answer for this. Any of this. These contracts are phased. Typically, coaches for CBOs, in my experience, as I know from having hired a CBO in the past and the coaching there, it's usually phased. It's usually phased over 2 years. My past experience was that the cost was more than what is being proposed here. That's why I recommended it, because it's a better value than what I've seen before, and from someone with the same amount of experience. And typically, yes, you will learn the work by doing the work, and it's seasonal work. And so Jim would be providing this expertise to whoever the CBO is on a sort of week-by-week basis to provide them sort of assistance with preparing board materials, preparing reports to the state, reports to the county, et cetera, on that coaching level to get them to the place where they can do the work. And then scaffolding, like you would for an English learner, for example, you eventually release that. And so that is why the contract is for 2 years in that regard. And there is also a 6-month termination clause, which I negotiated with Jim so that we can, if we feel like we need to end the relationship, we know we can do that on either end.
I just have one more comment too. It's just such an important position. I mean, I think it's vital that we make sure we have someone capable in this position. So that's why I'm fully in support of this.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the more, like, I had some questions for Sean previously about it, just make sure, because it's complicated, right? Especially because we have a lot of, like, moving parts right now in a lot of different ways. And this particular position, this role is, like, at the middle of helping a lot of other moving parts move, if you will. So, you know, from Sean's recommendation and from, you know, what we've been able to experience in the short time that you've been with us, I think to have your continued support through this time, you know, especially in such a strategic role that, again, bonus that it's cost neutral in a way, because when we do have a potential upside that measures in the 10 to 100 folds, even 2-fold, I think is a cost benefit for us. So, I want to, you know, thank you as well.
Well, I'm hoping that, well, you've got to vote on it, but I'm hoping that you understand that the recommendation, I think, is that this is a prudent, responsible measure, and I think there's an upside to it that we could actually wind up garnering a lot of savings and a lot of revenue going forward because of the relationship.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing as there are none, we will go to vote, and it is a resolution, so we will do by roll call. Now we'll start from my right, Freya?
Aye.
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 Aye. It passes 4+1 to 0. Thank you very much. Welcome, continued welcome, whatever the thing is. I'm glad today's not your last day with us entirely. Obviously, the role will change a little bit, but we're really thrilled to have you stay on board in this new capacity. Thank you. Let's see. Let's do it, well, I'm going to give it a little bit more time. I'm going to cut it close. Yeah, because I think we can do it. I'm not trying to get us out here by 10. No, we take the time we need, but I think we're probably pretty short. Martha's like, go girl. All right, item 15D. Stop talking. Approved response.
Stop laughing.
Both of you. Approved response to the grand jury report, item 15D. Concussions in San Mateo County High School sports. More to learn, more to do. This is Holly, and please do take the time you need. We're joking, but we can easily pass in about 30 seconds, you know, a curfew override, so.
Okay. Thank you. This item contains both the report and our response to the Superior Court of California of San Mateo's report and findings on the serious consequences of concussions that occur during high school sports. Pertaining specifically to the Cabrillo Unified School District, there were findings that, in fact, we were one of the 6 high school districts in the county that are providing a certified athletic trainer, and we are responding appropriately. There are significant protocols in place in our response that will help us to contribute to the county office's ability to understand and evaluate and keep data on the occurrence of serious concussions as it relates to high school sports. We have been very lucky to benefit from a certified athletic trainer that has been sponsored or co-sponsored by our Cougar boosters. We are currently, unfortunately, we do not have a certified athletic trainer. We lost our trainer at the beginning of the year. The position has been posted, and I understand that we have highly qualified community members that are providing that support during our games. We were found to have identified at-risk, high-risk sports and at the high school, and those sports are designated as football, soccer, wrestling, and basketball. And during those sports, we do provide an athletic trainer during competition. So we are on our way to understanding the consequences of concussions, and I think that our response to the grand jury, where we are absolutely in agreement with their findings, and we will agree to participate in the data collection with the county office. So I ask for your approval of our response to the grand jury.
Very good, thanks, Holly. We have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Questions or comments?
Comment, thank you also to the boosters who've helped us with our athletic trainer and also with our impact testing that all students have been doing the last 2 years prior to, and then as a tool for after, that was the neurological testing that they talk about, the baseline in the report. So.
I just have a quick logistical question. I assume that with these 4 sports, there are competitions happening at the same time? So how do we or no, are they like football? Yeah, so football, soccer, wrestling and basketball. So wrestling and basketball happen at the same time? And soccer, okay. So how do you, how does one person, do the schedules not overlap somehow? That one person can be at all the games, or, I don't know how we want to handle that question, but is it okay if John comes to the podium to address it? Okay.
John.
Yeah. I'm just curious, you run really fast from Palo Alto to Sunnyvale or whatever?
Well, no, anytime we have a home game, our trainer will be at the home game for when we have those multiple sports. And that's when we had Jessica, our trainer that's been with us for 4 years. So she would handle the home games. If there's a wrestling, let's say a wrestling meet and a soccer games going on at the same time, she's available. There's a cart where they could drive down to either one, and then road matches we don't, unless there's no other games, and then they will attend those. So like football, they always attend. We always have a trainer at road and home games for football, and many playoff basketball games, because the multiple amount of sports during the winter time that are high impact, we just do the best we can. And many of the schools do have somebody as a trainer, but it's not yet across the board, which is something that we're all hoping that becomes actually state law. California is one of the few that do not have a law that says we have to have a qualified athletic trainer, but they're working on legislation on that right now.
That's great. No, so it sounds
Like the priorities, the home games for all of those sports, and that's feasible because basically they get called up this an incident, they just run up, it's one campus, so that makes a lot of sense. And would they help somebody from the other team? Is there that kind of collaboration with the
Yes, that's what we've done in the past, that our trainer has, if a student a player from another team is injured, go out and do it unless they have their own trainer with them.
That makes sense. I mean, it's ethically the right thing to do, right? If you're
Yeah,
on
of
site,
course.
yeah. Okay, good. I just wanted to check. I was curious how that works, so I'm glad that you're able to address that. Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if seeing there are none, let's go to vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 4 + 1 to 0. Okay, thanks, Holly. Okay, Item E, approve change to the adopted governing board meeting calendar for 2019.
Now, this is a really quick thing. We were just thinking about asking the board to consider adding a second meeting in November, because we know that the parcel tax data will be coming in, and we just wanted to have that ability in the second meeting in November to discuss and have more free-form discussion in a special meeting about potential budget cuts for the district.
Do you have a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay, seeing as there are none, we will go to vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 4 + 1 to 0. Thanks, John. Okay, and last but not least, 15F, approve the board governance handbook.
As I presented and discussed with you all last board meeting, we had a retreat. Gosh, it seems like it was August. Was it August? With Sepideo from California School Boards Association. Thank you for reminding me, Rosie. Bless you. It's all blur now. So I thought that was very important work. And at the last meeting, we presented a board governance handbook that came from this board, talking about your values, your goals, how you want to work, and those protocols. And that board governance handbook would guide how we do business going forward. And I think it's a great step. And you had a discussion about it last time. And this comes back for the second read and hopefully approval. And I recommend approval.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Questions or comments? I'll just comment, thank you again for leading us through that process. I think as Kim commented at one point, it's the first time we've gone through something like that, and I can speak for myself and hopefully everybody else found it hugely valuable to have the conversation and to have a document to take away from it. I need to remember to carry it around and just I think that's, having gone through similar processes with other teams in the past, it's easy to just put it in your pile and you forget about it. But I think there was a lot of really good, useful information in there. So if there are ways we can kind of individually and or as a team think about how we can keep it fresh in our minds and not just kind of forget about it as something we did over the summer, but have it, something we live by. Pick up on Freya's comment that we discussed at the meeting, which was how do we keep that learning process going, right? So maybe we have a way of a rotating journal club. I'm thinking back to my grad school days of, everybody bring an article we read or something like that. I don't know what it is, but let's think about that and follow up and do that kind of a baseline team assessment. I think that Sepide recommended to you sometime in the early part of the year. I think it'd be good to kind of keep that ball rolling as we talked about earlier with regards to community engagement. So, that's my only comment.
And if I can just comment real quickly, I do want to say to the public and to the board members here, I appreciated that experience with the Good Beginnings workshop with you. I thought it was well facilitated by Sepideo. I thought you all brought, you were very earnest and very serious about the process, and I've appreciated you as a board and as people, as individuals, and as a body, as a governing body, and you have evidenced your ability to dialogue, to ask important questions, and to agree and to disagree, and to be able to say why. And I appreciate the process that you've shown through this, and I absolutely think that one thing you could do is we could look at how you could have a placemat so that at every board meeting you were reminded of sort of your agreements. Seppi, they talked about that. We could do that. But I do want to commend the board. I've appreciated being welcomed into this governance team, and I appreciate the work that you all do.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there no further questions or comments? Let's move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 4 + 1 to 0. Thank you. All right, we're going to do it before 10. 16, not that that's the goal. Like I said, we take our time. But I read fast. Future board agenda items, report on dyslexia and literacy assessments, interventions, and next steps. Ongoing financial overview updates, and approval of CUSD governing board policy updates, and adoption of proposed revisions as recommended by CSBA. Future events, dates, requests, hopefully no more power outages and lockdowns on this list. Just a quiet week or 2 or 52 would be nice. October 19th, 20th, of course, how can you miss Pumpkin Festival weekend? Except don't get in your car. October 17th, Great California Shakeout Drill at all school sites. The 28th through November 1st, Homecoming 2019, Half Moon Bay High School. October 14th, non-school day for students and teachers. That's this coming Monday, just a reminder for folks. October 15th, Staff Development Day and Minimum Day for students. November 7th, Big Lift Collaborative Meeting here in the DO Boardroom, 3 p.m. November 5th, Chamber Education Committee Meeting, District Office Boardroom, 4 p.m. 5th through 7th, Parent-Teacher Conferences at Cunha, Minimum Day for students. And November 7th, our next regular Governing Board meeting here at the District Office, 7 p.m. So we will not be returning to closed session, and we will therefore adjourn the meeting. I guess we need to have a motion to do that, which I'm going to do this. Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes 4 + 1 to 0. Thank you, everybody. Yay!